Hello there, and welcome to the Sleepy Science Channel. Tonight we'll be exploring the comforting world of food, a realm filled with flavor, with nourishment, and endless discoveries. Around us are the familiar tastes, the bread, the fruits, and the vegetables we encounter daily. But there is so much more than meets the tongue. Some of the dishes we enjoy have traveled across continents. A simple spice may have sparked wars centuries ago, and the warmth of a freshly baked loaf may connect us to traditions thousands of years old. Food is both ordinary and extraordinary, something we experience every day yet never ceases to comfort. If you enjoy these quiet explorations, I invite you to like and subscribe, or share a simple thought down in the comments. It helps others find their way here too, one sleepy soul at a time. But for now, all you need to do is rest, settle in, and allow the gentle world of food to carry you softly into sleep. Let's begin. The origins of bread. Bread is humanity's oldest prepared food. When you break open a warm loaf and breathe in its familiar aroma, you are participating in a ritual that stretches back more than 14,000 years. Archaeological evidence suggests that humans were grinding grains and mixing them with water long before agriculture even existed. These early breads were simple flatbreads, cooked on hot stones. No yeast, no rising, just grain and water transformed by heat. The discovery of leavened bread that rises and becomes soft and airy, likely happened by accident. Perhaps someone left their dough out overnight, and wild yeast from the air settled into it, causing it to bubble and expand. When baked, this dough would have been lighter, more digestible, and more flavorful than the dense flatbreads they were used to. Ancient Egyptians are often credited with mastering this technique, developing dozens of bread varieties. To the Egyptians, bread was more than sustenance. It was currency, used to pay workers who built the pyramids. It was sacred, offered to gods in temples. The hieroglyph for bread appeared in their written language hundreds of times, woven into the very structure of their communication. When you bite into bread today, you're tasting a food that has nourished civilizations, toppled kingdoms through scarcity, and brought communities together around shared meals for millennia. Honey never spoils. Honey is nature's eternal sweetness. Archaeologists have discovered pots of honey in ancient Egyptian tombs, sealed for over 3,000 years, and found them still perfectly edible. This remarkable preservation happens because honey is a supersaturated sugar solution with very low moisture content. Bacteria and microorganisms cannot survive in such an environment. Additionally, bees add an enzyme that produces hydrogen peroxide, giving honey natural antibacterial properties. The process of making honey is itself a marvel. A single bee will visit thousands of flowers in its lifetime, collecting nectar drop by drop. Back at the hive, bees pass this nectar from mouth to mouth, each one adding enzymes that break down complex sugars. They then deposit it into honeycomb cells and fan their wings to evaporate excess moisture. When the honey reaches the perfect consistency, they seal the cell with beeswax, creating a preserved store of energy. Different flowers produce different flavors of honey. Clover honey is mild and light. Buckwheat honey is dark and robust. Orange blossom honey carries the subtle perfume of citrus groves. Each jar captures not just sweetness, but the essence of a landscape, the taste of thousands of flowers concentrated into golden liquid. When you drizzle honey over toast or stir it into tea, you're enjoying a food that has remained unchanged since ancient times, a sweet connection to history. The tomato was once feared. The tomato, now beloved worldwide, was once considered poisonous. When tomatoes first arrived in Europe from the Americas in the 16th century, they were met with deep suspicion. Wealthy Europeans ate from pewter plates, which had high lead content. The acidic tomatoes would leach the lead from the plates, causing lead poisoning. People blamed the tomatoes, not realizing the plates were the culprit. For centuries, tomatoes were grown as ornamental plants, admired for their bright red fruit, but never eaten. They belonged to the nightshade family, which includes several poisonous plants, further cementing their dangerous reputation. Some called them poison apples. It wasn't until the 18th and 19th centuries that tomatoes gained acceptance as food, first in Italy and then gradually spreading throughout Europe and back to North America. Today, it's hard to imagine cuisine without tomatoes. Italian pasta sauces, Spanish gazpacho, Indian curries, Mexican salsas. The tomato has become indispensable. Scientists have identified thousands of varieties, from tiny cherry tomatoes that burst with sweetness to massive beefsteak tomatoes perfect for slicing. The transformation from feared ornament to culinary staple took centuries, but now tomatoes are among the most consumed vegetables, though botanically they are fruits, in the world. Vanilla comes from orchids. Vanilla, one of the world's most popular flavors, comes from the seed pods of orchids. The vanilla orchid is native to Mexico, where the Totonac people first cultivated it over 1,000 years ago. The Aztecs later conquered the Totonacs and discovered vanilla, using it to flavor their chocolate drinks. When Spanish conquistadors arrived, they brought vanilla back to Europe, where it became prized among the wealthy. Growing vanilla is a labor-intensive process. The orchid flowers bloom for just one day, and in most parts of the world, they must be hand-pollinated, because the specific bee species that naturally pollinates them only lives in Mexico. Once pollinated, the pods take months to develop. After harvest, they undergo a lengthy curing process, dried in the sun during the day and wrapped in blankets at night to sweat. This curing develops the complex flavor compounds we recognize as vanilla. Real vanilla is expensive because of this intensive cultivation. A single vanilla pod, or bean as it's commonly called, can cost several dollars. The tiny black seeds inside contain concentrated flavor, but the pod itself is also used to infuse cream, milk, and other liquids with vanilla's warm, sweet complexity. When you taste real vanilla, you're experiencing the result of careful cultivation, precise timing, and months of processing, all from a delicate orchid flower that blooms for just hours. Chocolate was once currency. Chocolate began its journey as currency, not candy. The ancient Maya and Aztec civilizations valued cacao beans so highly that they used them as money. A turkey might cost 100 cacao beans. A rabbit might be worth 10. The beans were precious because the cacao tree only grows in specific tropical climates, making them relatively rare and difficult to cultivate. The chocolate drink these civilizations created was nothing like the sweet hot chocolate we know today. They roasted and ground cacao beans, then mixed the powder with water, chili peppers, and other spices, creating a bitter, frothy beverage. This drink was reserved for nobility, warriors, and special ceremonies. The word chocolate itself likely comes from the Aztec word exocolotl, meaning bitter water. When Spanish explorers brought cacao back to Europe in the 16th century, they added sugar and vanilla, transforming the bitter drink into something more palatable to European tastes. For centuries, chocolate remained a luxury drink of the wealthy. It wasn't until the 19th century that innovations in processing, particularly the invention of the cocoa press and later solid chocolate bars, made chocolate accessible to common people. Today, chocolate is enjoyed worldwide in countless forms, but its origins as sacred currency remind us that this treat was once more valuable than gold. Salt shaped civilizations. Salt is so common now that we barely think about it. But throughout history, salt has been precious enough to spark wars, build trade routes, and even determine where cities were founded. The word salary comes from sal, the Latin word for salt, because Roman soldiers were sometimes paid in salt rations. Having a stable salt supply meant the difference between survival and starvation for ancient peoples. Before refrigeration, salt was the primary method of preserving food. Meat, fish, and vegetables could be packed in salt or submerged in brine, allowing them to last for months or even years. This meant that communities with access to salt could survive harsh winters, undertake long journeys, and trade their preserved goods over great distances. Coastal peoples harvested salt by evaporating seawater, while inland communities mined it from underground deposits or dried salt lakes. Salt routes crisscrossed the ancient world. The Via Salaria in Italy, one of Rome's oldest roads, was built specifically for transporting salt. African salt caravans traveled for months across the Sahara, trading salt for gold, weight for weight in some regions. Control over salt sources meant power and wealth. Cities like Venice and Salzburg, whose very name means salt castle, rose to prominence through the salt trade. The humble salt on your table connects you to this vast history of commerce and survival. Rice feeds more than half the world. Rice is the primary food source for over half of the world's population. This single grain, cultivated for at least 10,000 years, has shaped entire civilizations across Asia and beyond. Unlike wheat, which grows best in temperate climates, rice thrives in tropical and subtropical regions, making it ideal for the heavily populated areas of Asia. It can grow in flooded paddies, on hillside terraces, or in dry fields, adapting to different environments. The cultivation of rice has influenced culture, religion, and social structure throughout Asia. In many Asian languages, the words for rice and food are the same or closely related, showing how central rice is to daily life. Traditional rice farming required community cooperation, with neighbors helping each other plant and harvest, strengthening social bonds. Terraced rice paddies, carved into mountainsides over generations, represent thousands of hours of collective labor and engineering. There are over 40,000 varieties of rice, each with unique characteristics. Basmati rice from India has a distinctive aroma and fluffy texture. Japanese short-grain rice is sticky and perfect for sushi. Thai jasmine rice is fragrant and slightly sweet. Wild rice, despite its name, is actually a different species of grass altogether. Whether steamed, fried, ground into flour, or fermented into sake, rice provides versatile nourishment. Each bowl served represents millennia of cultivation and the sustenance of billions. Potatoes changed history. The humble potato, native to the Andes Mountains of South America, transformed the world when it was introduced to Europe. For thousands of years, Andean peoples cultivated hundreds of potato varieties at various altitudes, developing sophisticated freeze-drying techniques to preserve them. When Spanish conquistadors encountered potatoes in the 16th century and brought them back to Europe, they could not have predicted the impact this tuber would have. Initially, Europeans were suspicious of potatoes, which grew underground and resembled deformed roots. But potatoes had remarkable advantages. They could grow in poor soil where grain crops failed. They produced more calories per acre than wheat or barley. They could be left in the ground until needed, serving as their own storage. Slowly, potatoes spread across Europe, becoming a staple food, particularly in Ireland, where the population came to depend heavily on them. This dependency had tragic consequences. In the 1840s, A potato blight swept through Ireland, destroying crops and causing the Great Famine. Over 1 million people died, and millions more emigrated, forever changing Ireland's population and culture. The famine highlighted both the potato's importance and the danger of relying on a single crop. Today, potatoes are the world's 4th largest food crop, prepared in countless ways from simple baked potatoes to French fries, mashed, roasted, and boiled. They remain a testament to how a single plant can reshape societies. Coffee keeps the world awake. Coffee, the world's 2nd most traded commodity after oil, began its journey in the Ethiopian highlands. Legend tells of a goat herder named Kaldi, who noticed his goats became energetic after eating berries from a certain tree. Curious, he tried the berries himself and felt unusually alert. Word spread to local monks, who discovered that brewing the berries into a drink helped them stay awake during long prayers. From Ethiopia, coffee spread to the Arabian Peninsula, where it was cultivated in Yemen. By the 15th century, coffee houses appeared in Mecca and later throughout the Ottoman Empire. These establishments became centers of social activity, where people gathered to drink coffee, exchange news, play chess, and discuss politics. European travelers encountered coffee in these coffee houses and brought it back to their home countries, where it quickly gained popularity despite initial religious suspicion. Coffee cultivation spread globally, with European powers establishing plantations in their colonies across the tropics. Today, coffee is grown in over 70 countries, providing livelihoods for millions of farmers. The simple morning ritual of brewing coffee connects us to a vast global network. Each cup represents the labor of farmers who cultivated, harvested, and processed the beans, the roasters who developed the flavor, and centuries of cultural tradition. Coffee has fueled revolutions, inspired art, and brought people together in countless coffee shops around the world. Spices launched expeditions. The desire for spices drove some of history's greatest expeditions. In medieval Europe, spices like pepper, cinnamon, cloves, and nutmeg were worth more than their weight in gold. They flavored bland, preserved foods, disguised the taste of meat that was past its prime, and were believed to have medicinal properties. But these spices only grew in distant tropical regions, and the overland trade routes were controlled by Arab and Venetian merchants who charged enormous markups. European powers desperately wanted to break this monopoly and access spices directly. This desire motivated Portuguese explorers to sail around Africa to reach India. It inspired Christopher Columbus to sail west, hoping to reach Asia by a different route. Though he didn't find spices, he did encounter the Americas, forever changing world history. Ferdinand Magellan's crew became the first to circumnavigate the globe in their quest for the spice islands of Indonesia. The competition for spice trade led to the establishment of powerful trading companies, colonial empires, and centuries of conflict. The Dutch East India Company once controlled the nutmeg trade so completely that they destroyed nutmeg trees on islands they didn't control to keep prices high. Today, spices are affordable and accessible, but each pinch of cinnamon or dash of pepper carries with it a history of adventure, conflict, and the human desire for flavor. They remind us that food has always been worth traveling for, fighting for, and treasuring. Olive trees live for thousands of years. Olive trees are among the longest living trees on Earth, with some specimens estimated to be over 2,000 years old. These ancient trees, twisted and gnarled, still produce fruit year after year. In the Mediterranean region, where olives originated, these trees have witnessed the rise and fall of empires, the birth of religions, and the passage of countless generations. Some trees alive today may have provided olives to ancient Romans, early Christians, or medieval merchants. The olive tree is deeply woven into Mediterranean culture and history. Olive oil was used for cooking, lighting lamps, religious ceremonies, and even as medicine. In ancient Greece, olive crowns were awarded to Olympic champions. The olive branch became a universal symbol of peace. The tree's ability to grow in poor, rocky soil and withstand drought made it invaluable in harsh climates, where other crops struggled. Harvesting olives remains much as it has for centuries in many places. Nets are spread beneath the trees, and workers use long poles to shake the branches, causing ripe olives to fall. Fresh olives are incredibly bitter and must be cured in brine or lye before eating. Olive oil is extracted by crushing the fruit and pressing out the oil, a process refined over millennia. When you drizzle olive oil over a salad or dip bread into it, you're enjoying a flavor that humans have treasured for thousands of years, produced by trees that can outlive civilizations. Cheese is controlled decay. Cheese is one of humanity's most ingenious inventions, transforming perishable milk into a food that can last for months or even years. The basic process, discovered thousands of years ago, involves curdling milk with acid or rennet, separating the solid curds from the liquid whey, then aging the curds while carefully controlling bacteria and mold. What makes cheese fascinating is that it's essentially controlled decay, where specific microorganisms are encouraged while harmful ones are kept at bay. Different cheeses develop their unique characteristics through variations in this process. The milk source matters, whether from cows, goats, sheep, or even buffalo. The bacterial cultures added determine flavor and texture. The aging environment affects the final product, with temperature and humidity carefully monitored. Some cheeses, like cheddar, are aged for years, developing sharp, complex flavors. Others, like fresh mozzarella, are eaten within days of production. Blue cheeses like Roquefort and Gorgonzola introduce mold spores into the cheese, creating blue-green veins and pungent flavors. Soft-ripened cheeses like Brie and Camembert develop a white mold rind that breaks down proteins, creating a creamy interior. Washed rind cheeses are regularly bathed in brine or alcohol, encouraging specific bacteria that produce strong aromas. The world of cheese is vast, with thousands of varieties, each representing centuries of tradition and careful craft. From mild to intense, cheese showcases how humans have learned to harness microorganisms to create something delicious and lasting. From ephemeral milk, tea has been sipped for millennia. Tea is the most consumed beverage in the world after water. Legend attributes its discovery to Chinese Emperor Shen Nong in 2737 BCE, when tea leaves accidentally fell into his pot of boiling water. While the legend is myth, archaeological evidence confirms that tea cultivation and consumption in China dates back at least 2,000 years. For centuries, tea remained a Chinese secret, with elaborate rituals and ceremonies developing around its preparation and consumption. The Chinese developed multiple methods of processing tea leaves, creating green tea, black tea, oolong, white tea, and pu'er, all from the same plant, Camellia sinensis. The difference lies in how the leaves are treated after picking. Green tea leaves are quickly heated to prevent oxidation, preserving their green color and fresh flavor. Black tea leaves are allowed to fully oxidize, turning dark and developing robust flavors. Oolong falls in between, partially oxidized for complex, balanced characteristics. Tea eventually spread beyond China, first to Japan, where it became central to Zen Buddhism and gave rise to the Japanese tea ceremony, a ritual of mindfulness and aesthetics. Later, European traders brought tea to the West, where it became so popular that it triggered the Boston Tea Party and influenced the course of American independence. The British Empire established vast tea plantations in India and Ceylon, now Sri Lanka, making tea accessible worldwide. Today, whether it's a delicate Chinese green tea, a robust English breakfast blend, or a spiced Indian chai, tea continues to provide comfort, ritual, and connection across cultures. Fermentation preserves and transforms. Fermentation is one of humanity's oldest food technologies, predating recorded history. This process, where microorganisms like bacteria, yeasts, and molds break down sugars and starches, transforms raw ingredients into entirely new foods with enhanced flavors, improved digestibility, and extended shelf life. Our ancestors discovered fermentation accidentally, perhaps noticing that milk left out in warm weather turned into yogurt, or that grape juice stored in containers became wine. Almost every culture has developed fermented foods. Koreans created kimchi, spicy fermented vegetables that could last through harsh winters. Eastern Europeans made sauerkraut for the same reason. Middle Eastern peoples developed yogurt and kefir. Soybeans were fermented into miso, tempeh, and soy sauce across Asia. Bread, cheese, beer, wine, chocolate, coffee, and even vanilla all involve fermentation at some stage of their production. The tangy flavors and complex aromas we associate with these foods come from the metabolic processes of billions of microscopic organisms working in concert. Modern science has revealed that fermented foods offer health benefits beyond preservation. They contain probiotics, beneficial bacteria that support digestive health. They increase the bioavailability of nutrients, making them easier to absorb. They can break down compounds that some people find difficult to digest. But perhaps more important than the health benefits is the incredible diversity of flavors fermentation creates. From the funk of blue cheese to the effervescence of kombucha, from the umami depth of miso to the brightness of sourdough, fermentation shows how cooperating with microorganisms can create foods that delight our senses and nourish our bodies. Bananas are clones. The bananas you buy at the supermarket are all genetically identical clones. The Cavendish variety, which dominates global banana trade, is propagated through cuttings, not seeds. If you've ever noticed that store-bought bananas don't have seeds, that's because they've been cultivated for thousands of years to be seedless. Wild bananas are full of hard seeds, making them unpleasant to eat. Early banana cultivators in Southeast Asia selected mutations that produced seedless fruit, then propagated these plants vegetatively. This cloning creates a paradox. On one hand, it ensures consistency. Every Cavendish banana tastes the same, making them ideal for global trade. On the other hand, it makes the entire crop vulnerable to disease. In the 1,950 seconds, the Gros Michel banana, then the dominant variety, was wiped out by a fungal disease called Panama disease. The banana industry shifted to the Cavendish, which was resistant. But now, a new strain of Panama disease threatens the Cavendish, and scientists are racing to find solutions. Bananas have sustained civilizations. In parts of Africa and Asia, starchy plantain varieties are a staple food, eaten cooked rather than raw. Banana plants are technically giant herbs, not trees, and their trunk is actually tightly packed leaf bases. After flowering and producing fruit, the main stem dies, but new shoots emerge from the underground rhizome, continuing the cycle. The convenience and nutrition of bananas, packed with potassium, vitamins, and natural sugars, make them one of the world's most important crops, even as their genetic uniformity poses risks. Saffron is worth more than gold. Saffron, the world's most expensive spice, comes from the stigmas of the Crocus sativus flower. Each flower produces only 3 stigmas, and these must be hand-harvested during a brief flowering period in autumn. It takes about 150 flowers to produce just 1 gram of dried saffron. A pound of saffron requires harvesting from 50,000 to 75,000 flowers, representing countless hours of delicate manual labor. This explains why saffron can cost more than gold by weight. The use of saffron dates back over 3,500 years, appearing in ancient Minoan frescoes, Egyptian hieroglyphs, and classical Greek and Roman texts. Cleopatra reportedly bathed in saffron-infused milk for its cosmetic properties. Ancient healers used it to treat ailments, from depression to digestive issues. Its brilliant golden yellow color made it valuable as a dye for royal robes and religious garments. The wealthy flaunted their status by using saffron lavishly in cooking. Today, most saffron comes from Iran, which produces about 90% of the world's supply, though Spain, India, and Greece also cultivate it. The delicate threads must be harvested in the early morning, before the sun gets too hot, and processed immediately to preserve their flavor and aroma. When added to dishes like Spanish paella, Italian risotto milanese, or Persian rice, saffron imparts a distinctive, earthy, honey-like flavor and that characteristic golden hue. A tiny pinch is enough to transform a dish, making even a small amount of this precious spice last surprisingly long. Cinnamon sparked exploration. Cinnamon, a spice we now associate with comfort and warmth, was once so valuable it sparked expeditions around the globe. This aromatic bark from trees native to Sri Lanka and southern India was prized throughout the ancient world. The Egyptians used it in their embalming mixtures. The Romans burned it at funerals, with Emperor Nero reportedly burning a year's supply of cinnamon at his wife's funeral as a display of grief and wealth. For centuries, Arab traders controlled the cinnamon trade, transporting it along arduous routes and keeping its source secret to maintain their monopoly. They told fantastical stories about cinnamon, claiming it came from deep valleys guarded by giant birds, or that it was fished up from the Nile. These myths kept competition away and prices high. European powers, desperate to access cinnamon directly, eventually funded voyages that led to the Age of Exploration. The Portuguese finally reached Ceylon, now Sri Lanka, in 1505, and established control over the cinnamon trade. Later, the Dutch and then the British took over. Today, cinnamon is affordable and accessible, grown not just in Sri Lanka, but in Indonesia, China, and Vietnam. True Ceylon cinnamon is milder and more complex than the more common cassia cinnamon. When you sprinkle cinnamon on your oatmeal or add it to baked goods, you're using a spice that once inspired adventure, secrecy, and conquest, now democratized and comforting. Apples have traveled with humans. The apple you bite into today is a descendant of wild apples that originated in the mountains of Kazakhstan. These wild apples, Malus sieversii, still grow there, in forests where bears and other animals feast on fallen fruit. As humans migrated along the Silk Road, they carried apple seeds with them. Everywhere apples went, they adapted to local conditions and were crossbred with other wild apple species, creating incredible diversity. By the time apples reached ancient Greece and Rome, dozens of varieties existed. The Romans cultivated apples throughout their empire, spreading them across Europe. Each region developed its own favorites, suited to local climates and tastes. Some apples were best for eating fresh, others for cooking, and still others for making cider, which was often safer to drink than water in medieval times. When European colonists came to America, they brought apple seeds and seedlings with them. John Chapman, better known as Johnny Appleseed, became legendary for planting apple nurseries across the American frontier in the early 1800s. However, Most of his trees produced apples suitable primarily for making hard cider, not fresh eating, since apples grown from seed rarely resemble their parent. Today, thousands of apple varieties exist, from tart Granny Smiths to sweet Fujis, from crisp Honeycrisps to aromatic Galas. Each variety is maintained through grafting, ensuring consistency. The apple's journey from Kazakhstan to your fruit bowl spans continents and centuries. Chocolate and chili were ancient partners. Long before chocolate became the sweet treat we know today, it was paired with chili peppers in a spicy, savory beverage. The ancient Maya and Aztec civilizations ground cacao beans and mixed them with water, chili peppers, cornmeal, and other spices, creating a frothy, bitter drink called exocolotl. This beverage was consumed during sacred ceremonies and by warriors before battle, believed to provide strength and courage. The combination of chocolate and chili might seem unusual to modern palates accustomed to sweet chocolate, but it makes culinary sense. Both contain compounds that stimulate the palate and create warmth. Chili peppers contain capsaicin, which triggers heat receptors. Chocolate contains theobromine and small amounts of caffeine, which provide gentle stimulation. Together, they create a complex sensory experience: bitter, spicy, rich, and energizing. This pairing is experiencing a renaissance. Artisan chocolatiers now create chocolate bars infused with chili, paying homage to chocolate's ancient roots. Mexican mole sauces blend chocolate with chili peppers and other spices, creating complex, deeply flavored sauces for savory dishes. When the Spanish conquistadors first encountered chocolate, they found it too bitter and added sugar, transforming it into the sweet confection that spread worldwide. But the original combination reminds us that chocolate's story is far older and more complex than the candy bars lining modern shelves. Pasta's shape affects its source. Pasta comes in over 300 shapes, and these shapes are not arbitrary. Each was designed to pair with specific types of sauce, maximizing flavor and texture. Long, thin pasta like spaghetti or linguine works best with light, oil-based sauces or simple tomato sauces that can coat the strands evenly. The smooth surface and length allow the sauce to cling without overwhelming the pasta. Tubular pasta like penne, rigatoni, or ziti feature ridges and hollow centers that trap chunkier sauces. Meat sauces, vegetable sauces, and heartier tomato sauces, with pieces of ingredients nestle into the ridges and fill the tubes, ensuring every bite includes both pasta and sauce. The ridges also help cheese cling to the pasta, making them ideal for baked pasta dishes. Small pasta shapes like orzo, ditalini, or acini di pepe are designed for soups, where they can be easily spooned up with broth. Wide, flat pasta like pappardelle or lasagna sheets pair beautifully with rich, meaty ragouts that can sit atop the broad surface. Delicate filled pasta like ravioli or tortellini already contain rich ingredients, so they're typically served with simple butter and sage sauce, or light broth that won't compete with the filling. The diversity of pasta shapes reflects centuries of Italian culinary wisdom, where form follows function, and every detail enhances the eating experience. Ice cream was once a royal luxury. Ice cream, now a common frozen treat, was once so rare and expensive that only royalty and the extremely wealthy could afford it. Making ice cream required ice, which was difficult to obtain before refrigeration. Ice had to be cut from frozen lakes and rivers in winter, then stored in ice houses insulated with straw and sawdust. Keeping ice from melting in summer was a constant challenge and expense. The earliest frozen desserts likely originated in ancient China, where a mixture of milk, rice, and snow was eaten around 200 BCE. The technique spread slowly westward, By the 17th century, European royalty enjoyed elaborate frozen desserts at banquets. These early ice creams were made by nesting a container of sweetened cream inside a larger container of ice and salt, then manually churning the mixture until it froze. The process was labor-intensive and required access to both ice and the recipe knowledge, which was closely guarded. In America, ice cream remained a luxury until the 19th century, when technological advances made ice more available and ice cream machines more efficient. The invention of mechanical refrigeration in the late 1800s revolutionized ice cream production. By the early 20th century, ice cream had become accessible to the masses. Today, freezers make ice cream available year-round, and countless flavors exist beyond the simple vanilla and strawberry of earlier eras. But each scoop still carries with it the echo of luxury, when frozen cream was a marvel reserved for the privileged few. Avocados were saved from extinction. The avocado nearly disappeared from Earth entirely. This creamy fruit evolved millions of years ago to be eaten by megafauna, giant animals like ground sloths, the size of elephants. These enormous creatures would swallow avocados whole, walk miles away, and excrete the large seed in a new location, wrapped in natural fertilizer. This dispersal method allowed avocado trees to spread across their range. About 13,000 years ago, most of these megafauna went extinct, likely due to a combination of climate change and human hunting. Without their primary seed dispersers, avocados should have died out. Wild avocados became rare, confined to small pockets where their seeds could occasionally be spread by rivers or smaller animals. But humans intervened, recognizing the avocado's value as food. People in Mesoamerica began cultivating avocados over 5,000 years ago, saving the plant from extinction. Today, avocados are grown globally, from California to Chile, from Mexico to New Zealand. The Hass avocado, which accounts for about 80% of avocados eaten worldwide, originated from a single tree grown from a seed planted by Rudolf Hass in California in the 1922. Every Hass avocado tree alive today is grafted from that original tree. So when you slice open an avocado to make toast or guacamole, you're eating a fruit that survived extinction only through human cultivation. A plant designed for animals that no longer exist, now thriving because humans appreciated its buttery flesh. Garlic has protected humans for millennia. Garlic has been cultivated for at least 5,000 years, valued not just for its flavor, but for its medicinal properties. Ancient Egyptians fed garlic to workers building the pyramids, believing it provided strength and stamina. Greek athletes ate garlic before competitions and soldiers before battles. Ancient medical texts from Egypt, Greece, Rome, China, and India all mention garlic as a treatment for various ailments. The compound responsible for garlic's characteristic smell and many of its health benefits is allicin, which forms when garlic is crushed or chopped. Allicin has natural antibacterial and antifungal properties. During World War I, when antibiotics were scarce, garlic juice was applied to wounds to prevent infection. It became known as Russian penicillin during World War II, when the Soviet Union used it extensively for wound treatment. Different cultures have incorporated garlic differently. Mediterranean cuisines use it generously in cooking. Asian cuisines feature it in stir-fries and sauces. Middle Eastern cooking combines it with lemon and olive oil in countless dishes. Some cultures eat raw garlic, while others cook it until sweet and mild. Roasted garlic becomes soft and buttery, losing its sharp bite while retaining its aromatic quality. The vampire mythology surrounding garlic likely arose from its strong smell and protective properties. Whether used to ward off illness or simply to flavor food, garlic has been a faithful companion to humanity for millennia. Maple syrup requires patience. Maple syrup production is a testament to patience and the understanding of natural cycles. Native Americans discovered that tapping maple trees in late winter, when daytime temperatures rise above freezing but nights remain cold, allows sweet sap to flow from the trees. They collected this sap and boiled it down over fires, concentrating the sugars into syrup. Early European settlers learned this technique and adapted it, eventually developing more efficient collection and boiling systems. The process remains essentially unchanged. A single maple tree produces only about 10 gallons of sap per season, and it takes roughly 40 gallons of sap to make just 1 gallon of maple syrup. This means that a single gallon of syrup represents the output of several trees over several weeks of collecting. The sap must be boiled for hours to evaporate the water, leaving behind the concentrated amber syrup. The steam from this boiling fills the air with sweet fragrance. Different grades of maple syrup exist, ranging from light golden with delicate flavor to dark amber with robust, intense flavor. The color and taste depend on when in the season the sap was collected, with later sap producing darker syrup. Pure maple syrup contains minerals and antioxidants absent in processed corn syrup or artificial syrups. When you pour maple syrup over pancakes or waffles, you're enjoying a sweetener that requires months of cold weather to prepare the trees, weeks of careful collection during the narrow sugaring season, and hours of patient boiling. It's nature's sweetness, concentrated through human dedication. Mushrooms are neither plant nor animal. Mushrooms occupy their own kingdom of life, separate from plants and animals. For centuries, people classified them as plants because they grow from the ground and don't move. But mushrooms are fundamentally different. They don't photosynthesize. They can't produce their own food from sunlight. Instead, they're the fruiting bodies of fungi, organisms that digest their food externally, secreting enzymes to break down organic matter, then absorbing the nutrients. What we call a mushroom is just the reproductive structure, like an apple on a tree. The main body of the fungus is a network of thread-like structures called mycelium, which spreads through soil, wood, or whatever substrate the fungus colonizes. Some mycelial networks extend for miles underground, making them among the largest organisms on Earth. When conditions are right, the mycelium produces mushrooms that release spores, tiny seeds that drift on the wind to start new fungal colonies. Humans have cultivated mushrooms for centuries, with records of Chinese mushroom cultivation dating back 2,000 years. Today, button mushrooms, shiitakes, oyster mushrooms, and many others are grown commercially, but countless wild mushrooms are foraged in forests worldwide. Some mushrooms are prized for their culinary value, like morels, chanterelles, and porcini. Others have been used medicinally in various cultures. Some are deadly poisonous, requiring expert knowledge to distinguish from safe varieties. This mysterious kingdom provides decomposition services that recycle nutrients in ecosystems, medicine, food, and fascination. When you add mushrooms to your omelette, you're eating something neither plant nor animal, a reminder of life's diversity. Lemons came from Southeast Asia. Lemons, which we associate with Mediterranean sunshine, actually originated in Southeast Asia, likely in the region that includes northeastern India, northern Myanmar, and China. They're thought to be a hybrid between a citron and a bitter orange, developed thousands of years ago. Arab traders brought lemons westward, introducing them to the Middle East and North Africa. By the time of ancient Rome, lemons were growing in southern Italy, Though they remained rare and expensive, they were valued more as ornamental plants and for medicinal use than as food. It wasn't until medieval times that lemons became more common in Mediterranean cuisines. The Moors brought lemon cultivation to Spain. From there, Spanish and Portuguese explorers carried lemons on their ships, planting them wherever they established colonies. Lemons proved vital for sailors on long voyages. Scurvy, a disease caused by vitamin C deficiency, killed countless sailors on extended ocean crossings. In the 18th century, the British Royal Navy discovered that citrus fruits prevented scurvy, and they began provisioning ships with lemons and later limes, earning British sailors the nickname limeys. This simple preventive measure transformed naval warfare and exploration. Today, lemons are grown globally in warm climates. Their acidity brightens dishes, their juice preserves cut fruits from browning, and their zest adds aromatic oil to baked goods. From lemonade to lemon meringue pie, from preserved lemons in Moroccan tagines to lemon chicken in Chinese cuisine, this Southeast Asian hybrid has become indispensable worldwide. The saying, "When life gives you lemons, make lemonade," speaks to making the best of sour situations. But lemons themselves have always been precious, transforming both food and history. Corn was engineered over centuries. The corn we know today looks nothing like its ancestor. Modern corn, with its large cobs packed with hundreds of plump kernels, was engineered through selective breeding over thousands of years. Its ancestor was a wild grass called teosinte, which grows naturally in Mexico. Teosinte produces tiny ears with fewer than a dozen small, hard seeds. To ancient peoples, selecting and planting the teosinte plants with slightly larger seeds seemed promising. Generation after generation, Mesoamerican farmers saved seeds from the best plants, gradually transforming teosinte into maize. This process took thousands of years and represents one of the most dramatic genetic transformations achieved through traditional selective breeding. By the time Europeans arrived in the Americas, indigenous peoples had developed hundreds of corn varieties, adapted to different climates and elevations, from sea level to high mountain valleys. Corn became the foundation of civilizations. The Maya, Aztec, and Inca all depended on corn as their primary staple. Unlike wheat or rice, which existed as wild plants before domestication, corn cannot survive without human cultivation. Its kernels are so tightly packed and wrapped in husks that they cannot disperse naturally. Corn depends entirely on humans to plant it, just as many human societies came to depend entirely on corn for sustenance. Today, corn is the most produced grain globally, used not just as food, but for animal feed, ethanol fuel, and countless industrial products. Sweet corn, popcorn, flour corn, and dent corn are all varieties of this incredibly versatile plant. When you eat corn on the cob or popcorn at the movies, you're eating the result of one of humanity's greatest agricultural achievements, a plant that could not exist without us. Peppers measure heat in Scoville units. The spicy heat of chili peppers is measured on the Scoville scale, named after pharmacist Wilbur Scoville, who developed the test in 1912. The heat comes from capsaicin, a compound that binds to pain receptors in the mouth, tricking the brain into perceiving heat, even though there's no actual temperature change. Different peppers contain vastly different amounts of capsaicin, making some mild and others scorching. A bell pepper rates 0 Scoville units, producing no heat at all. A jalapeno ranges from 2,500 to 8,000 units, providing moderate spiciness. Habaneros jump to 100,000 to 350,000 units, creating intense heat. The hottest peppers, like the Carolina Reaper, exceed 2 million Scoville units. These super hot peppers were bred specifically for extreme capsaicin content, pushing the boundaries of what humans can tolerate. Why do people seek out such painful experiences? Capsaicin triggers the release of endorphins, the body's natural painkillers, creating a mild euphoria. This chilly high makes spicy food addictive for some people. Additionally, many cultures developed spicy cuisines in hot climates, where the sweating induced by capsaicin helps cool the body. Capsaicin also has antimicrobial properties, helping preserve food in warm environments before refrigeration. Different cuisines feature different peppers. Mexican cooking uses jalapenos, serranos, and poblanos. Thai cuisine features bird's eye chilies. Indian cooking employs various dried and fresh chilies. Korean cuisine uses gochugaru, dried pepper flakes. The spiciness level in traditional dishes often reflects both the local pepper varieties and cultural preferences that developed over centuries. When you bite into something spicy, you're experiencing a sophisticated interaction between plant chemistry and human neurology, one that has shaped cuisines worldwide. Oysters were once poor people's food. Today, oysters are considered a luxury, served at upscale restaurants and special occasions. But for centuries, they were food for the poor and working class. Oysters were incredibly abundant in coastal waters, forming massive reefs. In places like New York Harbor, oyster beds stretched for miles, and the shellfish were so plentiful they were practically free. Street vendors sold them from carts, and they were a common cheap meal. The oyster's decline began with industrialization and overharvesting. Pollution from factories poisoned coastal waters. Dredging operations destroyed oyster reefs. By the late 19th and early 20th centuries, oyster populations crashed. What was once abundant became scarce. As supply dwindled, prices rose, and oysters transitioned from working-class staple to delicacy. This same pattern has occurred with many foods. Abundance leading to popularity, followed by depletion that creates scarcity and luxury status. Today, oyster farming helps meet demand while protecting wild populations. Farmers grow oysters on suspended ropes or in cages, allowing them to filter feed on plankton while preventing them from being buried in sediment. Different regions produce oysters with distinct flavors, influenced by the water's salinity, temperature, and the specific algae available. Pacific oysters taste different from Atlantic oysters. Kumamoto oysters have their own character. Enthusiasts can taste the terroir of the sea in each oyster. Oysters also provide ecological benefits. A single oyster filters up to 50 gallons of water per day, removing pollutants and excess nutrients. Oyster reefs provide habitat for other marine species. Restoration projects now reintroduce oysters to damaged coastal ecosystems, hoping to revive both oyster populations and water quality. The humble oyster, once so common it fed the poor, now represents both luxury and environmental hope. Pineapples were status symbols. In 18th century Europe, pineapples were extraordinarily rare and expensive, making them the ultimate status symbol. Native to South America, pineapples require tropical conditions to grow and don't ship well. Bringing fresh pineapples to Europe required fast ships and careful handling, making each fruit worth a small fortune. A single pineapple could cost the equivalent of several thousand modern dollars. The wealthy didn't even eat their pineapples immediately. Instead, they displayed them at parties as centerpieces, showcasing their wealth. Guests admired the exotic fruit, taking it as evidence of the host's prosperity and connections. The pineapple might be displayed at multiple events until it began to rot, only then perhaps being eaten or even rented out to other families for their own displays. This status gave rise to the pineapple motif in architecture and design. Pineapples appeared carved on gateposts, worked into ironwork, and featured in textiles and furniture. The pineapple became a symbol of hospitality and welcome, a meaning it retains today. Colonial American hosts used pineapple imagery to signal their sophistication and generosity. The development of steamships and later refrigeration made pineapples more accessible. Hawaii became a major pineapple producer in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, canning pineapples and making them affordable worldwide. Today, pineapples are readily available in grocery stores, but they still carry a hint of their exotic past. The sweet, tropical taste still evokes sunshine and paradise, even if the fruit no longer costs a fortune. Carrots were not always orange. The orange carrot we know today is actually a relatively recent development. For most of history, carrots were purple, white, yellow, or red. The vegetable was first domesticated in Persia, modern-day Iran, and Afghanistan, over 1,000 years ago. These original carrots were primarily purple or yellow, smaller and more bitter than modern varieties. The orange carrot emerged in the 17th century in the Netherlands, where farmers selectively bred yellow carrots for a brighter orange color and sweeter taste. Some stories suggest this was done to honor the Dutch royal house of Orange, though this connection is debated. Regardless of the motivation, the orange carrot proved superior in taste and appearance, and it gradually replaced other varieties. The orange color comes from beta-carotene, which the human body converts to vitamin A, essential for vision, immune function, and skin health. This made the orange carrot not just more attractive, but more nutritious. As Dutch trade expanded, they spread orange carrots worldwide, and most other varieties fell out of cultivation. Recently, purple, yellow, and white carrots have made a comeback at farmers' markets and specialty stores, valued for their diverse flavors and nutritional profiles. Purple carrots contain anthocyanins, powerful antioxidants. Yellow carrots have different carotenoid compounds. White carrots have the mildest flavor. This rainbow of carrots reminds us that many traditional foods are actually the result of relatively recent selective breeding, and that older varieties still exist, waiting to be rediscovered. Strawberries are not actually berries. Despite their name, strawberries aren't true berries from a botanical perspective. True berries, like blueberries, grapes, and tomatoes, develop from a single ovary and contain seeds inside. Strawberries develop from the flower's receptacle, the part that holds the petals, not from the ovary. Those tiny specks on the outside of a strawberry are the actual fruits, called achenes, each containing a seed. The sweet red flesh we eat is just the enlarged receptacle. Botanically, strawberries are classified as aggregate accessory fruits. This technical detail doesn't diminish their deliciousness. Wild strawberries have been eaten for thousands of years. The small, intensely flavored fruits grew across Europe, Asia, and the Americas. In the 18th century, a chance hybrid between a North American species and a Chilean species created the large garden strawberry we know today. This hybrid was cultivated in France and proved superior to wild varieties, with larger fruit, better yield, and good flavor. From France, it spread globally. Today, strawberries are grown on every continent except Antarctica. California produces the majority of strawberries in the United States, with the long growing season allowing for nearly year-round harvest. Strawberries are delicate, with a short shelf life even when refrigerated. This fragility is why homegrown or locally grown strawberries taste notably better than those bred for shipping. Strawberries picked fully ripe and eaten fresh capture the essence of summer. Whether in shortcake, jam, smoothies, or eaten plain, strawberries remain one of the most beloved fruits. regardless of their botanical classification. Sourdough starter can live indefinitely. A sourdough starter, a mixture of flour and water that captures wild yeast and bacteria from the environment, can theoretically live forever with proper care. Some bakers maintain starters that are decades old, passed down through generations. These living cultures create the distinctive tangy flavor and chewy texture of sourdough bread through the fermentation process. Creating a starter from scratch takes about a week. You mix flour and water, let it sit, and feed it daily with more flour and water. Wild yeasts and lactobacillus bacteria colonize the mixture. The yeasts produce carbon dioxide that makes bread rise. The bacteria produce lactic acid and acetic acid that gives sourdough its characteristic tang. Over time, the microbial population stabilizes into a balanced ecosystem. Maintaining a starter requires regular feeding. Many bakers keep their starter at room temperature, feeding it daily. Others refrigerate their starter, slowing its metabolism so it only needs weekly feeding. Before baking, you remove some starter for your bread dough and feed the remainder to keep the culture alive. This continuous cycle connects baker to baker across time. Some starters have remarkable histories. Boudin Bakery in San Francisco has maintained the same mother dough since 1849, surviving even the 1906 earthquake when the baker's wife rescued it from their burning home. Such starters develop unique microbial profiles influenced by their environment, the flour used, and the handling routine. Bakers claim their region's starter produces bread that can't be replicated elsewhere. Whether scientifically proven or culinary lore, sourdough starters represent a living tradition where bakers nurture microscopic life to create daily bread. Almonds are related to peaches. Almonds and peaches are close botanical relatives, both members of the genus Prunus. If you've ever cracked open a peach pit, you'd find an almond-shaped seed inside that looks remarkably similar to an almond. In fact, this seed contains amygdalin, the same compound found in bitter almonds. The difference is that peach trees were bred for their fruit flesh, while almond trees were bred for their seeds. Both trees produce beautiful blossoms in spring, with almond blossoms appearing slightly earlier. In places like California's Central Valley, almond orchards create stunning displays of white and pink flowers, covering entire landscapes. These blossoms must be pollinated, usually by honeybees, for nuts to develop. Beekeepers truck millions of hives to almond orchards each February for this critical pollination period, representing one of the largest managed pollination events in the world. Almonds have been cultivated for thousands of years, with origins in the Middle East. They spread throughout the Mediterranean and Asia along ancient trade routes. The sweet almond varieties we eat today were selected from bitter wild almonds, which contain dangerous levels of cyanide compounds. Through careful breeding, farmers developed sweet almonds safe to eat raw. Today, California produces about 80% of the world's almonds, requiring vast amounts of water and millions of bees. The nuts are versatile, eaten raw, roasted, made into almond milk, ground into flour, or processed into marzipan. Almond blossoms symbolize hope and renewal in various cultures. When you eat an almond, you're eating the seed of a fruit that's been bred away, leaving only the nutritious kernel behind, a testament to agricultural ingenuity. Black pepper was once worth more than gold. Black pepper, now a staple in nearly every kitchen, was once more valuable than gold by weight. This simple spice drove global exploration and trade for centuries. Native to the Malabar coast of India, black pepper was treasured throughout the ancient world. It flavored food, preserved meat, and was believed to have medicinal properties. The Romans valued it so highly that they kept pepper reserves in their treasury. During medieval times, the pepper trade was controlled by Arab and Venetian merchants who transported it along difficult routes, carefully guarding the source. Black pepper became a marker of wealth. The phrase peppercorn rent originated from the practice of using pepper as payment for rent or debts. In some places, pepper could be used as currency, with specific regulations about its exchange rate. The European desire to access pepper directly, bypassing expensive middlemen, motivated much of the age of exploration. Vasco da Gama's voyage around Africa to India in 1498 was primarily seeking a sea route to obtain pepper. The Portuguese, then Dutch, and later British, established trade monopolies over pepper and other spices, controlling prices and supplies. Black peppercorns are simply unripe pepper berries, picked green and dried until they shrivel and blacken. White pepper comes from ripe berries with the outer layer removed. Green peppercorns are fresh, unripe berries preserved in brine or vinegar. Red and pink peppercorns are ripe berries, though pink peppercorns actually come from a different plant entirely. The various types offer different flavors and heat levels. Today, pepper is affordable and ubiquitous, but each grind of the pepper mill echoes centuries when this spice was precious enough to reshape the world. Coconuts travel by ocean. Coconuts are perfectly designed for ocean travel. Their hard shell protects the seed inside, while the fibrous husk provides buoyancy, allowing coconuts to float for months while remaining viable. This adaptation let coconuts spread naturally across tropical coastlines, drifting on ocean currents from island to island. When a coconut washes ashore, it can germinate in the sand, sending roots down and a shoot up, eventually becoming a new palm tree. This natural dispersal method, combined with human cultivation, has spread coconuts throughout the tropics. The coconut palm is sometimes called the tree of life because nearly every part has uses. The water inside young coconuts is sterile and can be drunk safely. The white flesh provides food, eaten fresh or dried into copra. Coconut milk and cream, made by processing the flesh, form the base of countless tropical dishes. The fibrous husk, called coir, is processed into rope, mats, and brushes. The hard shell can be carved into bowls, cups, or decorative items. The leaves are woven into thatch for roofing, baskets, and mats. The trunk provides lumber. Even the sap can be tapped to make sugar or fermented into palm wine. For island communities surrounded by ocean, the coconut palm provides comprehensive resources. Coconuts feature prominently in tropical cuisines worldwide. Thai curries swim in coconut milk. Indonesian and Malaysian dishes use coconut cream for richness. Caribbean cooking incorporates coconut in both savory and sweet preparations. Pacific Island cultures have been using coconuts for thousands of years. When you drink coconut water or cook with coconut oil, you're using a resource that traveled by sea, that sustained island communities, that represents perfect adaptation to coastal tropical environments. Potatoes can grow in space. Potatoes are so hardy and nutritious that they're being researched as a crop for space colonization. NASA and other space agencies have experimented with growing potatoes in simulated Martian conditions. The plant is remarkably adaptable, capable of growing in diverse climates and altitudes on Earth, from sea level to high mountains. This adaptability translates to controlled environments like spacecraft or future Mars habitats. The International Potato Center in Peru, which maintains a collection of over 4,000 potato varieties, collaborated with NASA to identify varieties best suited for space cultivation. They tested potatoes in harsh conditions, including soil similar to Martian regolith, finding several varieties that thrived. Potatoes provide carbohydrates, protein, vitamins, and minerals, offering complete nutrition in a way few single crops can match. On Earth, potatoes continue to be a vital food security crop. They're water efficient compared to grains, producing more food per acre with less input. They grow quickly, maturing in 90 to 120 days. They can be stored for months in cool, dark conditions without refrigeration. These qualities make potatoes ideal for feeding growing populations in developing regions and for emergency food supplies. The idea of astronauts growing potatoes on Mars isn't far-fetched science fiction. It's serious research with practical applications. If humans are to establish long-term settlements beyond Earth, they'll need to grow their own food, and potatoes are leading candidates. From the Andes to space stations, the humble potato continues proving its worth. When you eat a potato, you're eating a food that might one day sustain humans on other worlds. Nutmeg was worth waging war over. Nutmeg, the warm, sweet spice we associate with holiday baking, was once worth its weight in gold and sparked violent conflicts between European powers. Native only to the small Banda Islands in Indonesia, nutmeg was extremely rare and expensive. Traders who controlled nutmeg sources could demand extraordinary prices in European markets, where the spice was prized for flavoring food and as a supposed cure for plague. The Dutch East India Company sought to monopolize the nutmeg trade. In the early 17th century, they took control of the Banda Islands through military force, committing atrocities against the native population who resisted. The Dutch destroyed nutmeg trees on islands they didn't control and imposed the death penalty for smuggling nutmeg seeds. This brutal monopoly lasted for nearly 2 centuries, allowing the Dutch to control prices absolutely. Eventually, a French horticulturist managed to smuggle nutmeg seedlings to Mauritius, breaking the monopoly. The British also transplanted nutmeg to other colonies. Once nutmeg could be grown elsewhere, prices fell, and the spice became accessible to ordinary people. The island of Grenada in the Caribbean became a major nutmeg producer, even featuring the spice on its flag. Nutmeg is actually a 2-for-1 spice. The seed itself is ground into nutmeg powder. The lacy covering around the seed, called mace, is dried and used as a separate, more delicate spice. Both come from the same fruit of the nutmeg tree. Today, nutmeg seasons everything from eggnog to pumpkin pie, from bechamel sauce to mulled wine. Its warm, slightly sweet flavor remains beloved, though few people grinding nutmeg into their recipes know it once caused wars. Watermelons are 92% water. Watermelons are more water than fruit, with water content around 92%. This makes them incredibly hydrating, especially in hot climates where they originated. Wild watermelons grew in the Kalahari Desert of Africa, where they provided precious moisture to animals and humans in an arid environment. These wild ancestors were smaller and bitter compared to modern watermelons, but their water content was their primary value. Ancient Egyptians cultivated watermelons over 4,000 years ago, placing them in tombs to nourish the deceased in the afterlife. Watermelons spread throughout Africa, then to Asia via trade routes. They reached Europe during the Middle Ages and arrived in the Americas with European colonists and African slaves. Selective breeding over centuries created the large, sweet watermelons we enjoy today. Despite being mostly water, watermelons contain nutrients. They're rich in lycopene, the antioxidant that gives them their red color, the same compound found in tomatoes. They also contain citrulline, an amino acid that may have cardiovascular benefits. The high water and fiber content makes them filling without many calories, a refreshing summer snack. Every part of the watermelon is edible. The rind can be pickled or stir-fried, The seeds are roasted and eaten as snacks in many cultures, popular in China, the Middle East, and West Africa. Some watermelons are even grown specifically for their seeds rather than their flesh. On a hot day, biting into cold, crisp watermelon is one of summer's greatest pleasures. That burst of sweet juice is mostly water, but it carries with it the taste of sun, the satisfaction of refreshment, and a connection to ancient deserts, where water was life itself. Oranges were named before the color. The fruit came before the color in language. Before oranges became widely known in English-speaking countries, there was no specific word for the color we now call orange. People described orange things as yellow-red or red-yellow. The word orange entered English from the Spanish naranja, derived from the Sanskrit naranga. Oranges originated in Southeast Asia, possibly southern China or northeastern India. Arab traders brought them westward, planting orange groves throughout the Middle East and North Africa. The Moors introduced oranges to Spain, where they thrived in the Mediterranean climate. Portuguese explorers later found sweet oranges in China and brought them to Europe, where they became more popular than the bitter oranges previously known. The color was eventually named after the fruit, not vice versa. Before oranges became common, various terms were used. Red-haired people were called red-headed rather than orange-haired, a usage that persists even today. Once oranges became familiar, the color associated with them gained a specific name, and orange entered languages worldwide. Oranges became symbols of wealth and exoticism. European nobles built elaborate orangeries, special greenhouses designed to protect citrus trees through winter. These glass structures were expensive status symbols. The trees were often planted in large containers that could be moved indoors when frost threatened. Today, Florida and California orange groves produce millions of tons of oranges annually, making the fruit accessible year-round. When you peel an orange, you're unwrapping a fruit whose name changed language itself. Grapes are one of the oldest cultivated fruits. Grapes have been cultivated for at least 8,000 years, making them one of humanity's oldest agricultural crops. Archaeological evidence from the Caucasus region shows grape cultivation and winemaking dating back to 6000 BCE. Ancient Egyptians documented grape growing in hieroglyphics and tomb paintings. The Greeks and Romans spread viticulture throughout their empires, planting vineyards everywhere their influence reached. There are thousands of grape varieties, divided broadly into wine grapes and table grapes. Wine grapes tend to be smaller, sweeter, and have thicker skins with more tannins. Table grapes are larger, crisper, and have thinner skins. Some varieties are specifically grown for drying into raisins, a preservation method that concentrates the sugars and creates a shelf-stable food that sustained travelers and armies throughout history. The process of growing grapes, viticulture, is both an art and science. Grapevines are particular about their environment, requiring specific soil types, climate conditions, and sun exposure to produce quality fruit. The concept of terroir, how the local environment affects the flavor of wine, has been recognized for centuries. The same grape variety will produce different flavors when grown in different locations. Grapes contain resveratrol and other antioxidants, particularly in their skins, which have been linked to various health benefits. The Mediterranean diet, associated with longevity and health, includes grapes and wine in moderation. Whether eaten fresh, dried into raisins, pressed into juice, or fermented into wine, grapes have been part of human culture since our agricultural beginnings. They represent celebration, from toasts at weddings to New Year's traditions of eating 12 grapes at midnight. Yogurt is ancient preservation. Yogurt represents one of humanity's oldest methods of preserving milk. The exact origins are lost to time, but yogurt was likely discovered by accident when milk stored in animal skin bags was naturally fermented by bacteria. The warm climate and bacteria present in the environment created conditions for fermentation, transforming liquid milk into thick, tangy yogurt that lasted longer without spoiling. Central Asian and Middle Eastern nomadic peoples relied on yogurt for millennia. It provided protein and calcium that could be stored and transported without refrigeration. Turkish, Persian, Indian, and Balkan cultures all developed rich traditions around yogurt, incorporating it into savory dishes, drinks like lassi and ayran, and desserts. The word yogurt comes from Turkish, though the food predates the name by thousands of years. Yogurt's health benefits were recognized long before the science was understood. In the early 20th century, Russian microbiologist Eli Mechnikov noticed that Bulgarian peasants who consumed large amounts of yogurt lived longer, healthier lives. He isolated Lactobacillus bulgaricus, one of the bacteria responsible for fermenting milk into yogurt, and promoted yogurt as health food. This sparked yogurt's popularity in Western Europe and eventually worldwide. The fermentation process breaks down lactose, making yogurt easier to digest for many people with lactose intolerance. The live cultures, probiotics, support digestive health. Different cultures use different bacterial strains and fermentation methods, creating varying textures and flavors. Greek yogurt is strained to remove whey, making it thicker and higher in protein. Icelandic skyr is even more concentrated. Bulgarian yogurt has its own distinctive tang. From breakfast bowls to marinades, from smoothies to sauces, yogurt shows how bacterial fermentation transforms the temporary into the lasting. Sugar was called white gold. Sugar was so valuable in medieval Europe that it was called white gold, affordable only to the wealthy. Native to New Guinea, sugarcane spread slowly across Asia and the Middle East. Arab traders brought it to Europe, where it remained an expensive luxury for centuries. Most Europeans relied on honey as their primary sweetener, while sugar was reserved for the rich and used almost like medicine. The European colonization of tropical regions transformed sugar from luxury to commodity. Sugarcane plantations were established in the Caribbean, Brazil, and later other tropical colonies. These plantations relied heavily on enslaved labor, first of indigenous peoples, then primarily Africans, transported through the horrific Middle Passage. The sugar trade became deeply intertwined with slavery, one of history's darkest chapters. As production increased through this brutal system, sugar prices fell, making it accessible to working-class Europeans by the 18th and 19th centuries. Tea and coffee, bitter drinks that had recently arrived in Europe, became palatable when sweetened, and sugar consumption skyrocketed. By the 20th century, sugar was ubiquitous, added to countless processed foods beyond just desserts. The sugar beet, discovered to contain similar sugars to sugarcane, provided an alternative source in temperate climates. This made Europe less dependent on tropical imports. Today, sugar comes equally from sugarcane and sugar beets. Modern concerns about sugar focus on overconsumption and health effects. Diabetes, obesity, and dental problems are linked to excessive sugar intake. The substance once precious as gold is now so cheap and abundant that it's become a public health concern. The story of sugar is one of desire, exploitation, industrialization, and the complex consequences of abundance. Sesame seeds open automatically. The phrase "open sesame" from Arabian Nights may reference how sesame seed pods burst open when mature, scattering seeds everywhere. This characteristic made sesame slightly challenging to harvest traditionally, requiring careful timing to catch the seeds before they dispersed. Modern varieties have been bred with pods that remain closed, making mechanical harvesting easier. Sesame is one of the oldest oilseed crops, cultivated for over 3,000 years. It likely originated in India or Africa, spreading throughout Asia and the Middle East. Ancient Babylonians used sesame oil for cooking and lamp fuel. It was traded along the Silk Road and appears in early Hindu myths as a symbol of immortality. In many Middle Eastern and Asian cultures, sesame retains ceremonial and nutritional significance. The seeds are tiny but nutrient-dense, containing protein, healthy fats, fiber, and minerals like calcium and iron. They're used whole or ground into tahini, a paste that forms the base of hummus and numerous sauces. Sesame oil, particularly the toasted variety common in Asian cooking, adds distinctive flavor. The seeds top hamburger buns, bagels, and bread worldwide. Halva, a confection made from tahini and honey or sugar, appears in many cultures, from the Middle East to India to the Balkans. Black sesame seeds, unhulled and with a stronger, nuttier flavor, are prized in Asian cuisines for both taste and appearance. They're ground into black sesame paste for desserts or sprinkled whole on dishes for contrast. White sesame seeds are actually natural seeds, with the hull removed. Both types have been opening their pods and spreading their seeds for millennia, waiting for humans to discover their value and carry them across the world. Ketchup started as fish sauce. The ketchup we know today, thick, sweet, tomato-based, bears little resemblance to its ancestor. The word ketchup likely comes from the Chinese ketchup, a fermented fish sauce. British sailors encountered similar fermented sauces in Southeast Asia and brought the concept back to Europe. Early European ketchups were thin, salty sauces made from anchovies, mushrooms, walnuts, or other ingredients, anything but tomatoes. Tomato ketchup emerged in America in the early 19th century. As tomatoes gained acceptance as food, various cooks experimented with tomato-based sauces. These early tomato ketchups were often homemade, thin, and varied widely in flavor. They contained less sugar than modern versions and spoiled quickly without proper preservation. Henry J. Heinz revolutionized ketchup in the late 1800s. His company developed a thick, sweet tomato ketchup with a long shelf life, using ripe tomatoes, vinegar, sugar, and spices. The distinctive narrow-necked glass bottles became iconic. Heinz advertised his ketchup as pure and wholesome, at a time when many food products contained questionable additives. The brand became so dominant that Heinz ketchup became essentially synonymous with ketchup itself in many countries. Today, ketchup is one of the most popular condiments globally, particularly in America, where it accompanies everything from French fries to eggs. Some food purists disdain it as overly sweet and covering up other flavors. Others consider it essential. The thick consistency, bright red color, and sweet tangy flavor create a unique taste that children especially love. From fermented fish sauce to tomato sauce to global condiment empire, ketchup's transformation shows how foods evolve across cultures and centuries. Cacao trees grow pods on their trunks. Unlike most fruit trees where fruit develops on branches, cacao trees produce large pods directly on their trunks and main branches. This unusual characteristic is called cauliflower. The pods start as small flowers that emerge straight from the bark. Once pollinated, these flowers develop into football-shaped pods that can be 6 to 12 inches long, containing 20 to 60 cacao beans, surrounded by sweet white pulp. Cacao trees are native to Central and South American rainforests, growing in the understory beneath taller trees. They require shade, humidity, and warm temperatures to thrive. The Olmec, Maya, and Aztec civilizations cultivated cacao and held it sacred. The pod's unusual growth pattern may have contributed to the mystical reverence surrounding cacao, as fruits emerging from tree trunks seemed magical. Harvesting cacao is labor-intensive. Workers use machetes to carefully cut pods from trunks without damaging the bark or flower cushions where new pods will grow. The pods are opened and beans are removed. Along with pulp, the beans undergo fermentation, usually in banana leaf-covered piles, where the pulp breaks down and beans develop flavor precursors. Then they're dried in the sun before being shipped to chocolate makers. From these humble beans comes the chocolate industry worth billions. The beans are roasted, cracked, and ground into chocolate liquor, the base of all chocolate products. Cocoa butter is extracted, cocoa powder is produced, and various ingredients are added to create different chocolates. The journey from pod on trunk to chocolate bar is complex, involving farmers, fermenters, traders, and manufacturers. When you bite into chocolate, you're experiencing the transformed seeds of pods that grew straight from a tree's trunk, a botanical oddity that became one of the world's most beloved treats. Bread leavened the world. The invention of leavened bread represents one of humanity's great culinary discoveries. For thousands of years, people ate flatbreads, dense discs cooked on hot stones. Then someone, somewhere, discovered that dough left to sit would bubble and expand. When baked, this dough became lighter, softer, more digestible, and more flavorful than flatbread. Wild yeasts from the air had colonized the dough, feeding on the sugars and producing carbon dioxide that created air pockets. Ancient Egyptians are often credited with mastering leavened bread. They recognized that saving a bit of yesterday's risen dough to mix into today's fresh dough would make the new batch rise reliably. This was the first sourdough starter, maintained and passed down through generations. Egyptian bakers developed dozens of bread types, and bread became so integral to their society that workers were paid partly in bread rations. The Greeks and Romans adopted bread making from the Egyptians and spread it throughout Europe. Roman professional bakers, pastores, formed guilds and were respected citizens. The white bread made from refined flour was reserved for the wealthy, while brown bread from whole grain flour fed the poor. This class distinction around bread types persisted for centuries. The Industrial Revolution mechanized bread production. Commercial yeast was isolated and sold, replacing sourdough starters in many bakeries. Sliced bread, introduced in 1928, became so popular that the best things since sliced bread became an idiom for anything excellent. Today, bread remains a staple for billions. Whether risen with commercial yeast, sourdough starter, or chemical leavening like baking powder, leavened bread represents the transformation of simple ingredients through controlled fermentation into something far greater than the sum of its parts. Figs require tiny wasps. Figs have one of nature's most fascinating pollination relationships. Unlike most fruits that develop from pollinated flowers, figs are actually inverted flowers. What we think of as the fruit is a hollow receptacle with flowers blooming inside. These flowers cannot self-pollinate, and the tree cannot reproduce without a specific species of tiny fig wasp. Female fig wasps enter the fig through a tiny opening, losing their wings in the process. Inside, they lay eggs and pollinate flowers simultaneously. The wasp dies inside the fig. Her offspring develop, mate inside the fig, and the next generation of females emerges carrying pollen. They fly to new figs to repeat the cycle. The male wasps, born without wings, never leave the fig where they hatched. This relationship is so specific that each fig species has its own wasp species, and neither can survive without the other. It's co-evolution at its finest. Two species so interdependent they function as a single system. For humans eating figs, the wasp's remains are broken down by enzymes inside the fig, becoming part of the fruit. By the time you eat a fig, no wasp bodies remain intact, just protein absorbed into the fruit. Figs have been cultivated for thousands of years, making them one of the earliest agricultural crops. Dried figs could be stored and transported, providing nutrition through seasons and on long journeys. Fresh figs are delicate and don't ship well, making them a local treat in fig-growing regions. Their sweet, jammy interior and slightly chewy texture are beloved in both sweet and savory dishes, from cheese plates to salads to desserts. Each fig represents an intricate natural partnership millions of years in the making. Tea bags were an accident. Tea bags, now the most common way many people brew tea, were invented by accident. In 1908, New York tea merchant Thomas Sullivan sent tea samples to customers in small silk bags. He intended for the recipients to remove the tea and brew it loose, as was customary. Instead, customers found it convenient to brew the tea directly in the bags, and they requested more tea in bags. Sullivan realized he had stumbled onto something and began producing tea bags intentionally, switching from silk to gauze and later to paper. The convenience of tea bags made tea accessible to people who found loose-leaf brewing too complicated. You didn't need special equipment or knowledge, just hot water and a cup. During World War II, tea bags were included in soldiers' rations, further popularizing them. Traditional tea enthusiasts often disparage tea bags, arguing they contain lower-quality tea dust and fannings rather than whole leaves. The small bag constrains the tea leaves, preventing them from expanding fully and releasing their complete flavor. This criticism has merit for cheap tea bags. However, modern premium tea bags contain quality tea, and some use pyramid-shaped bags with more space for leaves to expand. The debate between loose-leaf and bagged tea continues. Loose-leaf advocates point to superior flavor and the ritual of proper tea preparation. Tea bag defenders appreciate convenience and consistency. Some cultures never adopted tea bags, maintaining traditional brewing methods. Others embraced them fully. Whether brewed from bags or loose leaves, tea remains the world's most popular beverage after water. The accidental invention of tea bags democratized tea drinking, making it simpler and faster, even if purists lament what was lost in translation. Pomegranates symbolize prosperity. Pomegranates have symbolized fertility, prosperity, and eternal life across numerous cultures for thousands of years. The fruit's multitude of seeds, encased in jewel-like arils, made it a natural symbol of abundance and fertility. Ancient Persians believed pomegranates granted invincibility. Greeks associated them with Persephone, whose consumption of pomegranate seeds bound her to the underworld for part of each year, explaining the seasons. In Judaism, pomegranates are one of the 7 species mentioned in the Torah. Tradition holds that each pomegranate contains 613 seeds, corresponding to the 613 commandments in the Torah, though actual seed counts vary. Pomegranates appear in religious art and architecture, decorating synagogues and adorning ceremonial objects. During Rosh Hashanah, the Jewish New Year, eating pomegranate seeds symbolizes the hope for a fruitful year. In Christianity, pomegranates represent resurrection and eternal life, appearing in religious paintings alongside other symbolic fruits. Islamic tradition holds that pomegranates from paradise are the most delicious fruit, and they're mentioned multiple times in the Quran. The fruit appears in Persian and Middle Eastern art, architecture, and poetry as a symbol of love, beauty, and abundance. Nutritionally, pomegranates justify their symbolic status. They're rich in antioxidants, vitamins, and fiber. The areoles provide bursts of sweet tart juice when bitten. Eating a pomegranate requires patience and care, separating the areoles from bitter white membrane. Some people find this meditative, others frustrating. Pomegranate juice has become popular for its health benefits, though it can be quite expensive due to the labor involved in extracting juice from so many small areoles. From ancient symbolism to modern superfood, pomegranates continue to represent abundance and life. Salt mines look like underground cathedrals. Deep beneath Earth's surface lie massive salt deposits, remnants of ancient seas that evaporated millions of years ago. When these salt deposits are mined, they create vast underground chambers that resemble cathedrals. The Wieliczka salt mine in Poland, operational since the 13th century, extends over 180 miles of tunnels and chambers. Miners carved chapels, sculptures, and even chandeliers entirely from salt over the centuries. Salt mining was dangerous, back-breaking work. Miners spent their entire lives underground, sometimes never seeing daylight for months, yet they created beauty in the depths. In Wieliczka, the chapel of Street Kinga, carved from salt, features intricate altarpieces and reliefs. The salt is naturally white and crystalline, catching light and creating ethereal atmospheres. The mine is now a UNESCO World Heritage Site and tourist attraction. Other salt mines worldwide show similar grandeur. The Sifto salt mine beneath Lake Huron in Canada covers an area the size of 30,000 football fields. The Quinoa salt mine in Pakistan, one of the world's oldest, features pink and red salt formations. The Salina Turda in Romania has been converted into an underground amusement park, with a Ferris wheel and mini-golf, all inside a massive salt cavern. Salt's importance throughout history explains why humans excavated these massive underground spaces. Before modern mining equipment, salt was extracted by hand, with pickaxes and chisels. Workers risked collapses, bad air, and flooding. Yet the salt they mined was essential for preserving food, maintaining health, and trading for other goods. These underground cathedrals of salt are monuments to both human need and human perseverance. They remind us that beneath our feet lie resources that sustained civilizations and created hidden wonders. Vanilla extract requires months to make. Real vanilla extract, the kind labeled pure in stores, takes months to produce. After vanilla beans are harvested and cured, a process that already takes months, they're chopped and soaked in alcohol. The alcohol slowly extracts the vanilla compounds from the beans, including vanillin, the primary flavor compound, along with hundreds of other aromatic molecules that create vanilla's complex flavor profile. Commercial producers usually soak vanilla beans in alcohol for several months, often 6 or more, occasionally replenishing with fresh beans to ensure extraction continues. The ratio of beans to alcohol is carefully controlled to meet legal requirements for vanilla extract strength. Homemade vanilla extract follows the same principle, but often takes even longer, as home extractors typically don't have access to industrial extraction methods that can speed the process. Imitation vanilla, in contrast, is made from vanillin, synthesized from wood pulp or petrochemicals. It's much cheaper and faster to produce than real vanilla extract, but it lacks the complexity of real vanilla. Real vanilla contains over 200 different compounds that contribute to its flavor, while imitation vanilla is essentially just one compound. The difference is noticeable in side-by-side comparisons, though in heavily spiced or flavored baked goods, the distinction becomes less apparent. The time and labor involved in producing vanilla, from hand-pollinating flowers to curing beans to months-long extraction, explains why real vanilla is expensive. When a recipe calls for vanilla extract and you add a teaspoon, you're adding the result of months or years of work by multiple people across the globe. That tiny amount of brown liquid carries the essence of an orchid's seed pod, transformed through human patience and knowledge into one of the world's most beloved flavors. Cashews grow outside their fruit. Cashews have one of the most unusual growth patterns in the plant world. The cashew nut, technically a seed, grows outside its fruit, hanging beneath a pear-shaped structure called a cashew apple. The cashew apple is actually the swollen stem of the cashew flower, while the seed develops in a kidney-shaped shell that dangles below it. Cashew apples are edible and juicy, with a sweet, somewhat astringent flavor. In regions where cashews grow, particularly Brazil, India, and Africa, cashew apples are eaten fresh, made into juice, fermented into vinegar, or distilled into liquor. However, cashew apples bruise easily and don't ship well, so they're rarely seen outside cashew-growing regions. Most of the world only knows the nut, not realizing there's a fruit attached. Processing cashews is challenging and potentially dangerous. The shell contains urushiol, the same toxic oil found in poison ivy. Contact with this oil causes severe skin reactions. Workers must roast or steam the shells to neutralize the toxin before cracking them open to extract the cashew nut. This processing is labor-intensive and typically done by hand. Poor working conditions and low wages in some cashew processing regions have raised ethical concerns about the industry. Once processed, cashews are versatile. They're eaten, roasted, and salted as snacks, ground into cashew butter, or made into cashew milk as a dairy alternative. Cashews are softer and sweeter than most nuts, with a buttery texture that makes them excellent for making vegan cream sauces when blended with water. Indian cuisine uses cashews extensively in curries and desserts. The next time you eat a cashew, remember its unusual origin, dangling beneath the fruit, wrapped in a toxic shell, requiring careful processing to become the creamy snack we enjoy. Quinoa was the gold of the Incas. Quinoa, pronounced quinoa, was so important to the Inca civilization that they called it the mother grain, or gold of the Incas. For thousands of years, Andean peoples cultivated quinoa at high altitudes where few other crops could grow. The plant thrives in harsh conditions, tolerating poor soil, frost, drought, and high altitude. These characteristics made it invaluable in the Andes Mountains. The Incas held quinoa sacred. The emperor traditionally planted the first seeds of the season, using golden tools in ceremonial observance. Spanish conquistadors, failing to recognize quinoa's value and attempting to suppress indigenous culture, discouraged quinoa cultivation in favor of European grains. Quinoa nearly fell into obscurity, maintained only by indigenous communities in remote areas. Quinoa's rediscovery and recent popularity stem from its nutritional profile. It's a complete protein, containing all 9 essential amino acids, unlike most plant foods. It's high in fiber, vitamins, and minerals. It's naturally gluten-free. These qualities made quinoa popular among health-conscious consumers worldwide in the 2000s. This surge in demand dramatically increased quinoa prices, benefiting some Andean farmers, but also creating concerns about food security in regions where quinoa was traditionally a staple. Technically, quinoa isn't a grain at all. It's the seed of a plant related to spinach and beets, but it's cooked and eaten like a grain, making it a pseudo-cereal. It has a slightly nutty flavor and becomes fluffy when cooked properly. Today, quinoa is grown not just in South America, but also in North America and Europe. The ancient Incas' sacred crop has become a global health food, its seeds carrying forward a tradition thousands of years old. soy sauce, is fermented for years. Traditional soy sauce is made through a fermentation process that can last months or even years. The process begins with soybeans and wheat, which are steamed and mixed with specific mold cultures, usually Aspergillus. This mixture, called koji, ferments for several days. Then, it's mixed with salt water and transferred to large fermentation tanks or barrels where it ages. During aging, enzymes break down the proteins and starches into amino acids and sugars, creating the complex, savory flavors soy sauce is known for. Traditionally, this aging happened in large ceramic pots or wooden barrels, exposed to the elements. The temperature fluctuations of seasons contributed to flavor development. Some premium soy sauces age for 3 to 5 years, developing deeper, more nuanced flavors. Chinese soy sauce and Japanese shoyu have slightly different production methods and flavor profiles, though both follow the basic fermentation principle. Dark soy sauce is aged longer and often has molasses added, making it thicker and slightly sweet. Light soy sauce is thinner and saltier. Tamari is Japanese soy sauce made with little or no wheat, making it suitable for gluten-free diets. Modern industrial soy sauce is often made through chemical hydrolysis, breaking down soybeans with acid in hours rather than months. This process is faster and cheaper, but produces inferior flavor. Many additives, including caramel coloring and corn syrup, might be added to approximate the flavor of traditionally brewed soy sauce. True, traditionally brewed soy sauce, labeled as such, is worth seeking out. The depth of flavor achieved through patient fermentation cannot be replicated by shortcuts. Each drop represents months of transformation, simple ingredients becoming complex through time, microorganisms, and human knowledge passed down through generations. Pistachios open when ripe. Pistachios are called the smiling nut in Persian and the happy nut in Chinese because their shells naturally split open when the nut ripens. This makes them one of the easiest nuts to harvest and eat. The split occurs as the growing kernel expands and breaks through the shell. Pistachios that don't open naturally are often discarded during processing, though sometimes they're mechanically opened. Native to the Middle East and Central Asia, pistachios have been cultivated for at least 3,000 years. They grew wild in regions that are now Iran, Iraq, and Syria. Ancient Persians and other Middle Eastern peoples valued pistachios highly. According to legend, the Queen of Sheba decreed that pistachios were exclusively royal food forbidden to commoners. They were transported along the Silk Road, spreading to the Mediterranean region. Pistachios arrived in America in the 1880 seconds, but commercial cultivation didn't begin until the 1970 seconds in California's Central Valley. The climate there proved ideal, and California now produces most of America's pistachios. The nuts grow in clusters on small trees, looking like grapes from a distance. Harvest involves mechanical tree shakers that vibrate the branches, causing ripe nuts to fall onto catching frames. The distinctive green color of pistachio kernels comes from chlorophyll. The intensity of the color varies by variety and growing conditions. Iranian pistachios tend to be greener than California pistachios. The flavor is delicate, slightly sweet, with a hint of pine. Pistachios are eaten, roasted, and salted as snacks, used in desserts like baklava and gelato, ground into pistachio butter, or made into pistachio paste for confections. Each smiling shell opens to reveal a nut that's traveled from ancient Persia to modern snack bowls worldwide. Dark chocolate is healthier than milk chocolate. Dark chocolate contains higher percentages of cacao and lower amounts of sugar and milk than milk chocolate, making it healthier in moderation. Cacao contains flavonoids, antioxidants that may support heart health, reduce inflammation, and improve blood flow. The higher the cacao percentage, generally the more flavonoids present. Dark chocolate, with 70% cacao or higher, is considered best for health benefits. Milk chocolate, by contrast, contains more sugar and milk solids, diluting the cacao concentration. It's sweeter and creamier, but offers fewer of the beneficial compounds found in cacao. White chocolate contains no cacao solids at all, only cocoa butter, sugar, and milk, providing no chocolate-specific health benefits. It's essentially a confection that tastes like chocolate, but lacks the plant compounds that make chocolate potentially beneficial. The bitterness of dark chocolate comes from cacao's natural flavors, which aren't inherently sweet. Sugar masks this bitterness in milk chocolate, making it more immediately appealing to many palates. However, dark chocolate enthusiasts learn to appreciate the complex bitter notes, detecting subtle fruit, wine, or spice flavors in high-quality dark chocolate, much like wine tasting. Artisan chocolate makers produce single-origin dark chocolates, highlighting cacao from specific regions. Venezuelan cacao tastes different from Ecuadorian or Madagascan cacao, each with unique flavor profiles, influenced by soil, climate, and processing methods. Bean to bar chocolate makers control every step, from sourcing cacao beans to producing finished bars, ensuring quality and often paying farmers fair prices. When you eat dark chocolate, especially high-quality varieties, you're experiencing cacao in a purer form, tasting the fruit of a tropical tree transformed through fermentation, roasting, and careful crafting. Peanuts are legumes, not nuts. Despite their name, peanuts aren't nuts at all. They're legumes related to beans, lentils, and peas. Unlike tree nuts that grow on branches, peanuts develop underground. The peanut plant flowers above ground, but after pollination, the flower stalk grows downward, pushing into the soil where the peanut pods develop. This unusual characteristic is called geocarpy. Peanuts originated in South America, likely in Bolivia or Peru, where they were cultivated over 3,500 years ago. Spanish and Portuguese explorers encountered peanuts and brought them to Africa, where they became an important crop. African slaves brought peanuts back across the Atlantic to North America during the slave trade. Initially, peanuts in America were considered food for livestock and the poor, not respected as human food. George Washington Carver transformed peanuts' status in the early 20th century. He researched and promoted over 300 uses for peanuts, from food products to industrial applications. His work helped Southern farmers transition from cotton to peanuts, restoring nitrogen to soil depleted by years of cotton cultivation. Peanuts became an important crop economically and nutritionally. Peanut butter, now an American staple, was invented in the late 1800s and popularized in the early 1900s. It provided an affordable protein source and became especially important during world wars when meat was rationed. Today, Americans consume over 1.5 billion pounds of peanut butter annually. Peanuts are also eaten roasted, boiled, or used in countless dishes worldwide, from African groundnut stew to Chinese kung pao chicken to Thai satay sauce. Though botanically a legume, peanuts provide similar nutrition to tree nuts and occupy a similar culinary niche. They're a reminder that common names don't always reflect botanical truth. Apricots traveled the Silk Road. Apricots originated in China, where they were cultivated over 4,000 years ago. They spread westward along the Silk Road, the ancient trade routes connecting China to the Mediterranean. Merchants and travelers carried apricot seeds, along with silk, spices, and other valuable goods. Each region the apricot reached cultivated it, adapting varieties to local conditions. By the time of ancient Rome, apricots had reached the Mediterranean region. The Romans called them Praecotia, meaning precocious, because apricot trees bloom early in spring, often risking frost damage. This Latin name evolved into various European words for apricot. The trees thrived in Mediterranean climates, becoming important in Middle Eastern, Turkish, and Greek cuisines. Spanish missionaries brought apricots to California in the 18th century, planting them at missions up and down the coast. California's climate proved ideal, and the state became a major apricot producer. Fresh apricots are delicate, with a short season and limited shelf life. This explains why dried apricots are more common than fresh in many regions. Drying concentrates the sugars, creating a chewy, sweet, dried fruit that lasts months. Apricot kernels, the seeds inside the pits, are eaten in some cultures, but contain amygdalin, which releases cyanide when digested. In small quantities, the body can process this safely, and the kernels have been used in traditional medicine. However, consuming large quantities of apricot kernels is dangerous. The sweet fruit flesh, however, is safe and nutritious, high in vitamins A and C. When you eat an apricot, you're tasting a fruit that traveled thousands of miles over centuries, carried by traders on camels and ships, planted by missionaries and farmers until it reached your table. Herbs versus spices. A simple distinction. The difference between herbs and spices comes down to which part of the plant is used. Herbs are the leafy green parts of plants used for flavoring, like basil, parsley, cilantro, and mint. Spices come from other parts of plants. Seeds like cumin and coriander, bark like cinnamon, roots like ginger and turmeric, or flower buds like cloves. Some plants provide both herbs and spices. Cilantro leaves are an herb, while coriander seeds from the same plant are a spice. This distinction helps explain why herbs and spices are used differently. Fresh herbs are delicate, losing flavor when cooked too long. They're often added at the end of cooking or used raw as garnish. Dried herbs are more concentrated, but still relatively subtle. Spices, being denser parts of plants, withstand longer cooking and release their flavors gradually. Many spices benefit from toasting or blooming in oil to develop their full aromatic potential. Historically, spices were more valuable in trade than herbs because they came from specific tropical regions and could be dried and transported over long distances. Herbs, growing easily in temperate climates, were accessible to anyone with a garden. Medieval European monasteries cultivated herb gardens not just for cooking but for medicine. Many culinary herbs also had medicinal applications in traditional healing systems worldwide. Today, both herbs and spices are readily available, fresh and dried. The rise of farmers' markets has made fresh herbs more accessible. Home cooks grow herbs in pots on windowsills. Spice shops offer dozens of whole and ground spices from around the world. Whether you're adding fresh basil to pasta or grinding cumin seeds for curry, you're working with plants that have flavored human food for thousands of years. The distinction between herbs and spices is simple, but their combined contribution to cuisine is immeasurable. Honey flavors reflect the flowers. Every jar of honey tells the story of the flowers bees visited. Bees forage up to several miles from their hive, visiting whatever is blooming. In regions with diverse wildflowers, the resulting honey is complex, with subtle variations each season. In areas where single crops dominate, like orange groves or buckwheat fields, bees produce monofloral honey with distinctive characteristics reflecting that specific flower. Clover honey, one of the most common types, is light, mild, and sweet. Orange blossom honey carries citrus perfume. Lavender honey has floral notes, Eucalyptus honey is mentholated and strong. Buckwheat honey is dark, robust, almost molasses-like. Tupelo honey from the southern United States is prized for its light color and unique flavor. Manuka honey from New Zealand's Manuka trees has become famous for purported medicinal properties and commands premium prices. Beekeepers can influence honey flavors by placing hives near specific crops. However, bees will forage where they find the best sources, so complete control is impossible. The time of year affects flavor too. Spring honey tends to be lighter and more delicate, as bees gather from early blooming flowers. Late summer honey is typically darker and more robust, reflecting the season's different nectar sources. Honey's color ranges from almost clear to nearly black, with flavor intensity generally correlating with color darkness. Light honeys are subtle, dark honeys are bold. All honey contains the essence of its source flowers, concentrated by bees into golden sweetness. When you taste honey, you're tasting a specific time and place, a particular landscape's flowers interpreted through the work of thousands of bees. Each type of honey is unique, irreplaceable, a flavor that can only come from that combination of flowers, bees, and geography. Rhubarb leaves are poisonous. Rhubarb, with its tart pink stalks perfect for pies and jams, hides a secret. Its leaves are toxic, containing high levels of oxalic acid and other compounds that can cause serious illness or death if consumed in large quantities. This creates an unusual situation where part of the plant is edible and delicious, while another part is poisonous. Only the stalks are eaten, and they're so sour they require substantial sugar to become palatable. Rhubarb isn't actually a fruit, it's a vegetable, but it's almost always prepared as if it were fruit, cooked with sugar into desserts. Strawberry rhubarb pie is a classic American combination, the strawberry's sweetness balancing the rhubarb's tartness. Rhubarb grows easily in cold climates, thriving where many fruits struggle. It was one of the first fruits available in spring in northern regions, making it especially valuable before modern transportation brought year-round access to produce. English and American gardens traditionally included rhubarb patches, and forcing rhubarb indoors in dark sheds created tender, sweeter stalks that were delicacies. The plant originated in Asia, where its roots were used medicinally long before anyone ate the stalks. Chinese medicine used rhubarb root as a purgative for thousands of years. Only in the 18th century did Europeans begin eating the stalks, once sugar became affordable enough to make them palatable. Today, rhubarb's distinctive tartness is appreciated in pies, jams, compotes, and even savory dishes, where its acidity complements rich meats. Just remember, stalks only, never the leaves. Eggs can be preserved for months. Before refrigeration, people developed numerous methods to preserve eggs. Fresh eggs, protected by a natural coating called the bloom, can last weeks at cool room temperature. Washing eggs removes this protective layer, which is why American eggs require refrigeration, while European eggs, often unwashed, don't. But to extend storage even further, various preservation techniques were developed. Water glassing was a popular method, where eggs were submerged in a solution of sodium silicate, effectively sealing the pores in the shell and preventing air and bacteria from entering. Eggs preserved this way could last 6 months to a year. Other methods included coating eggs in fat, oil, or wax, or packing them in salt, sawdust, or lime water. Each method aimed to seal the shell and prevent spoilage. In China, century eggs are created through a preservation process using alkaline, clay, ash, salt, and quicklime. The eggs cure for weeks or months, transforming the yolk into a dark green or gray creamy substance. and the white into a dark, translucent amber jelly. Despite the name, they don't take a century to make, just several weeks. The resulting eggs have a pungent smell and complex, acquired taste flavor. Modern refrigeration has made most preservation methods obsolete, but understanding them reminds us that food storage was once a critical survival skill. Every season's abundance had to be preserved to survive lean months. Today, we open refrigerators expecting fresh eggs year-round, barely thinking about the effort that once went into ensuring eggs lasted beyond the chicken's peak laying season. Those preserved eggs represented security, the difference between having protein through winter or going without. Coffee beans are seeds. Coffee beans aren't beans at all. They're the seeds of coffee cherries, the fruit of the coffee plant. Each cherry typically contains 2 seeds facing each other with their flat sides together. These seeds are what we call coffee beans. When you see coffee growing, you see trees or shrubs covered in bright red or purple cherries, not beans hanging from branches. Coffee cherries are picked, processed to remove the fruit flesh, and the seeds are dried. There are 2 main processing methods. Wet processing involves removing the fruit flesh immediately after picking, fermenting to remove remaining pulp, then drying the seeds. Dry processing involves drying the entire cherry, then removing the dried fruit flesh, a method that often produces fruitier, more complex flavors in the final coffee. The seeds are then roasted, transforming them from green to brown, while developing the flavors we recognize as coffee. Light roasts preserve more of the bean's original characteristics and have higher caffeine content. Dark roasts develop deeper, more caramelized flavors but have slightly less caffeine. The roasting process involves hundreds of chemical reactions, creating the complex aromatics that make coffee so appealing. What we casually call a coffee bean is actually a seed that's been processed, roasted, ground, and brewed. The journey from coffee cherry on a tree to steaming cup of coffee involves farmers, processors, roasters, and baristas, each contributing to the final flavor. The bean terminology is so ingrained that few people stop to think about the cherry it came from, the fruit that once surrounded this seed, providing it with nutrients and protection until it was ready to create a new coffee plant. Or, in our case, a delicious morning brew. Cauliflower comes in many colors. While white cauliflower is most common, the vegetable actually comes in several colors. Purple cauliflower contains anthocyanins, the same antioxidants found in red wine and berries. Orange cauliflower is high in beta-carotene, providing more vitamin A than white varieties. Green cauliflower, or broccoflower, is a cross between broccoli and cauliflower. There's even a lime green variety called Romanesco, with a fractal-like, spiraling appearance. All cauliflower is the same species as broccoli, Brussels sprouts, cabbage, kale, and kohlrabi, all descendants of wild cabbage selectively bred for different characteristics. Cauliflower was bred for its immature flower buds, which form the dense white head we eat. Left unharvested, cauliflower would eventually flower and go to seed, like any cabbage relative. White cauliflower requires special growing techniques. The large outer leaves must be tied over the developing head to shield it from sunlight, a process called blanching. Without this protection, cauliflower develops a greenish, less appealing appearance and stronger flavor. Colored varieties don't require blanching, making them easier to grow, though they've only recently gained popularity in mainstream markets. Cauliflower's mild flavor makes it versatile. It can be roasted, steamed, mashed, riced, or eaten raw. It's become popular as a low-carb substitute for rice and pizza crust. Indians make cauliflower curries. Italians pickle it for giardiniera. Americans turned cauliflower into buffalo wings. Its neutral taste absorbs whatever seasonings you use, making it a culinary chameleon. Whether white, purple, orange, or green, cauliflower represents the incredible diversity possible through selective breeding from a single wild ancestor. Maple syrup is only from certain trees. Not all maple trees produce sap suitable for making syrup. Sugar maples produce the highest sugar concentration in their sap, making them the preferred species. Black maples are also excellent. Red maples and silver maples can be tapped, but produce less sweet sap, requiring even more boiling to create syrup. The sugar content in maple sap typically ranges from 1% to 4%, with sugar maples at the higher end. The trees must be mature before tapping, usually at least 30 years old and about 12 inches in diameter. A small tap hole is drilled into the tree, and a spout is inserted. Sap drips from the spout into a bucket, or, in modern operations, flows through plastic tubing to collection tanks. Each tap hole produces about 10 gallons of sap per season, and larger trees can support multiple taps without harm. The sap only flows during sugaring season, a narrow window in late winter and early spring when temperatures rise above freezing during the day but drop below freezing at night. These temperature fluctuations create pressure changes in the tree that push sap out of tap holes. If the weather stays too warm or too cold, flow stops. The season might last only a few weeks, and timing varies by location and weather patterns each year. Indigenous peoples of northeastern North America discovered maple sugaring long before European contact. They made V-shaped slashes in tree bark, inserted reeds to channel sap into birch bark containers, then boiled it by dropping hot rocks into the liquid. European settlers adopted and refined these techniques. Today, maple syrup production combines tradition with modern technology. Reverse osmosis systems remove water before boiling, and vacuum pumps increase sap flow. But the fundamental process remains: collecting sweet sap and boiling it down to concentrate nature's gift into golden syrup. Eggplants were named for appearance. Eggplants earned their English name from white varieties that looked like eggs hanging from the plant. These white eggplants, smaller and egg-shaped, were more common in Europe when the vegetable first arrived from Asia. The large purple eggplants, now popular in America and Europe, came later, but the name stuck even though they don't resemble eggs at all. In many countries, eggplant is called aubergine, from the Arabic al-badinyan. The vegetable originated in India, where it was cultivated for thousands of years, before spreading to China, and then throughout Asia. Arab traders brought it to the Mediterranean region, where it became integral to cuisines from Italy to Turkey to Morocco. Different regions developed varieties suited to their climates and preferences. Asian eggplants tend to be long and slender, with thinner skin and fewer seeds than globe eggplants. They're less bitter and cook faster. Japanese and Chinese cuisines use these varieties extensively in stir-fries and braises. Italian eggplants are round or oval, perfect for slicing into rounds for eggplant parmesan. Middle Eastern varieties are similar, used for baba ganoush and moussaka. Eggplant flesh oxidizes quickly when cut, turning brown like apples. The spongy texture absorbs oil readily, making it challenging to cook without it becoming greasy. Salting sliced eggplant before cooking draws out moisture and reduces oil absorption. When properly prepared, eggplant becomes creamy and mild, taking on flavors of whatever seasonings are used. From smoky baba ganoush to crispy eggplant chips to hearty eggplant parmesan, this versatile vegetable has traveled from India to tables worldwide, carrying its egg-inspired name as a reminder of varieties most of us have never seen. Yeast are single-celled fungi The yeast that makes bread rise and ferments beer and wine isn't a chemical, it's alive. Yeasts are single-celled fungi, invisible to the naked eye but present almost everywhere. Wild yeasts float through the air, live on fruit skins, and inhabit the surfaces of plants. Ancient peoples didn't understand what caused dough to rise or grape juice to become wine, but they learned to harness these invisible workers. In bread making, yeast consumes sugars in the flour and produces carbon dioxide gas and alcohol as byproducts. The gas creates bubbles in the dough, causing it to rise and become light and fluffy. The alcohol evaporates during baking. In beer and winemaking, yeast consumes sugars from grains or grapes, and the alcohol remains in the beverage, while carbon dioxide either escapes or, in some beers and sparkling wines, is trapped to create carbonation. Different yeast strains produce different flavors. Baker's yeast, usually Saccharomyces cerevisiae, is selected for reliable rising and neutral flavor. Brewer's yeast strains are chosen for specific flavor profiles they create in beer. Wine yeasts vary by region and style, each contributing different characteristics. Wild yeasts create unique, often unpredictable results, prized by some bakers and brewers but avoided by others preferring consistency. Active dry yeast and instant yeast sold in stores are domesticated strains, carefully cultivated and dried for long shelf life and reliable performance. Fresh yeast, sold in blocks, is more perishable but some bakers prefer it. Sourdough starters contain diverse communities of wild yeasts and bacteria working together. Each method of using yeast, whether commercial or wild, harnesses these microscopic fungi to transform simple ingredients into risen bread, fermented beverages, and countless other foods. There are invisible partners in the kitchen, working quietly to create everyday miracles. Peaches are in the rose family. Peaches, along with many of our favorite fruits, belong to the rose family, Rosaceae. This family includes apples, pears, cherries, plums, apricots, almonds, strawberries, and raspberries. These seemingly different fruits share common ancestry, which becomes apparent when you notice similarities in their flowers. Apple blossoms, cherry blossoms, and strawberry flowers all have 5 petals arranged similarly, a family characteristic. Peaches originated in China, where they've been cultivated for over 4,000 years. They symbolize immortality and unity in Chinese culture. The fruit spread along the Silk Road to Persia, modern-day Iran, where it was adopted so enthusiastically that Europeans later believed peaches originated there. The botanical name Prunus persica reflects this misconception. Spanish explorers brought peaches to the Americas, where Native Americans embraced them. Peach trees spread throughout the American South, becoming an integral part of Southern cuisine and culture. Georgia is called the Peach State, though California now produces more peaches. The fruit thrives in temperate climates, with cold winters for dormancy and warm summers for ripening. Fresh peaches are delicate, with a short window of perfect ripeness. Too early, they're hard and bland. Too late, they're mushy and mealy. This narrow window explains why peaches from your local farm or backyard tree taste so much better than shipped supermarket peaches picked underripe. The fuzzy skin, which some people find annoying, protects the fruit and is completely edible. Nectarines are simply peaches with a genetic mutation that produces smooth skin. Whether white-fleshed or yellow-fleshed, freestone or clingstone, peaches are summer's gift, a reminder that we share our favorite fruits with roses, a botanical family that gives us beauty and deliciousness in equal measure. Asparagus makes urine smell funny. Asparagus contains asparagusic acid, a compound that breaks down during digestion into sulfur-containing chemicals. These chemicals are volatile, meaning they evaporate easily, and they're excreted in urine within 15 to 30 minutes of eating asparagus. The result is a distinctive smell that's been described as sulfurous or cabbage-like. Interestingly, not everyone can smell it. Genetic variations affect whether people produce the odorous compounds and whether they can detect the smell, creating 4 groups: producers who can smell it, producers who can't, non-producers who can smell it in others, and those who neither produce it nor smell it. Asparagus has been cultivated for over 2,000 years, prized by ancient Greeks and Romans as a delicacy. It was one of the first vegetables to be cultivated, and the tender young shoots, harvested in early spring, commanded high prices. White asparagus, popular in Europe, is simply green asparagus, grown under soil or tarps to prevent photosynthesis, keeping it pale and mild. Green asparagus has a stronger flavor and more nutrients from sun exposure. The vegetable takes patience to grow. Newly planted asparagus crowns shouldn't be harvested for 2 to 3 years as they establish themselves. But once established, an asparagus bed can produce for 15 to 30 years, sending up tender spears each spring. The spears are actually the young shoots of the plant. If left unharvested, they grow into tall, ferny plants. Asparagus is nutritionally impressive, low in calories but high in vitamins K, A, C, and folate. Whether roasted, grilled, steamed, or eaten raw in salads, asparagus signals spring's arrival. The distinctive post-asparagus urine smell might be awkward, but it's a harmless curiosity, a reminder that what we eat doesn't just nourish us, but can produce unexpected effects, detected or not, depending on our individual genetics. Ancient Romans loved garum. Garum was a fermented fish sauce beloved throughout the Roman Empire, used as ubiquitously as salt. Made from fish, intestines, and blood mixed with salt and left to ferment in the sun for months, garum underwent enzymatic breakdown that created a clear, amber liquid with a complex, savory flavor. Romans added garum to nearly everything: vegetables, meats, desserts, even wine. Different grades existed, from expensive garum made from specific fish to cheap versions available to the masses. The production centers were located in coastal areas, particularly Spain and North Africa, where the smell of fermenting fish wouldn't disturb cities. Workers layered fish parts with salt in large vats, then left them in the sun. Over weeks and months, enzymes from the fish guts broke down proteins into amino acids, creating glutamates, the compounds responsible for umami flavor. The liquid was then strained, bottled, and shipped throughout the empire. Modern palates familiar with Asian fish sauces can understand garum. Thai nam pla, Vietnamese nuoc mam, and Filipino patis are all fermented fish sauces used similarly to ancient garum. They provide savory depth and salt to dishes. The techniques and products are remarkably similar across time and geography, showing how different cultures independently discovered that fermented fish creates an indispensable flavoring. Garum disappeared from European cuisine after Rome's fall, though it persisted in modified forms in parts of the Mediterranean. The rediscovery of ancient Roman recipes mentioning garum puzzled historians until they made the connection to Asian fish sauces. Some modern chefs have experimented with recreating authentic garum using historical recipes. The results are described as deeply savory, salty, and rich with umami, a taste profile Romans found irresistible. What seems exotic to modern Americans was everyday flavor to ancient Romans, proving that taste preferences are deeply cultural and changeable across time. Popcorn is an ancient snack. Popcorn isn't a modern invention. Archaeological evidence shows that Native Americans were eating popcorn at least 5,000 600 years ago. Popcorn kernels have been found in caves in New Mexico, and early Spanish explorers documented Native Americans making popcorn. The indigenous peoples of the Americas popped corn in several ways: throwing ears of corn directly onto fires, heating sand in pottery, and mixing kernels in the hot sand, or placing kernels on hot stones. Popcorn is a specific variety of corn with hard shells and starchy centers. When heated, moisture inside the kernel turns to steam. The pressure builds until the hull ruptures, and the starch explodes outward, creating the white, fluffy structure we eat. Not all corn pops. Sweet corn, the kind we eat on the cob, doesn't pop properly. Only varieties specifically cultivated for their popping ability work. Native Americans introduced popcorn to colonists, and it became a popular snack in America by the 19th century. Street vendors sold popcorn at fairs, parks, and circuses. The invention of the mobile popcorn cart made it even more accessible. When movies became popular in the early 20th century, popcorn and cinema became inseparably linked. Theater owners initially resisted, considering popcorn too messy. But during the Great Depression, popcorn was cheap, and theaters found it profitable. The association stuck. Today, Americans consume billions of quarts of popcorn annually. It's one of the healthiest snacks when air-popped, being a whole grain with fiber and antioxidants. Unfortunately, movie theater popcorn drowning in butter and salt isn't quite as healthy. Microwave popcorn made the snack even more convenient, though some varieties contain concerning additives. Whether plain, buttered, caramel-coated, or flavored with cheese, popcorn is an ancient food that found its perfect modern venue in darkened movie theaters, where the crunch becomes part of the cinematic experience. Lemons don't grow true from seed. If you plant a lemon seed, the tree that grows probably won't produce lemons identical to the one the seed came from. Most citrus, including lemons, are hybrids that don't breed true. The seeds might produce fruit with different characteristics, perhaps more sour, differently shaped, or even a different type of citrus altogether. This genetic variability is why commercial citrus is propagated through grafting rather than seeds. Grafting involves taking a cutting from a tree with desirable characteristics and attaching it to the rootstock of another tree, usually a hardier variety with good root systems. The grafted cutting grows into a new tree that produces fruit identical to the parent tree. This technique, used for thousands of years, allows farmers to maintain specific varieties and ensure consistency. The unpredictability of citrus breeding led to many citrus varieties being discovered accidentally. A branch on one tree might mutate, producing different fruit. Farmers who noticed these sports would propagate them through grafting, creating new varieties. The navel orange originated from a single mutated branch on a tree in Brazil. That mutation was grafted and spread worldwide, and all navel oranges today descend from that one branch. Cross-pollination between different citrus species creates new hybrids. Tangelos are tangerine grapefruit crosses. Maya lemons are lemon-orange hybrids. Many citrus fruits we consider distinct species are actually hybrids of pomelos, citrons, and mandarins, the three original citrus species. Humans have been mixing and matching citrus for so long that untangling the family tree is challenging. When life gives you lemons, remember they're the product of human cultivation and natural mutation, carefully maintained through grafting, because nature alone wouldn't reliably reproduce them. Brussels sprouts are a modern vegetable. Brussels sprouts, those little cabbage-like vegetables people love or hate, are surprisingly modern. While they're descended from wild cabbage like other brassicas, the specific variety we know as Brussels sprouts was developed in Belgium near Brussels, hence the name. sometime in the 16th or 17th century. Before that, they didn't exist as a distinct vegetable. For decades, Brussels sprouts had a terrible reputation, considered bitter and sulfurous, especially when overcooked. Boiling Brussels sprouts, until mushy, a common preparation in mid-20th century America and Britain, breaks down compounds that release sulfur, creating an unpleasant smell and taste. Generations grew up hating Brussels sprouts based on this preparation. But cooking methods matter enormously with this vegetable. In the 1990 seconds, Dutch scientists bred a new variety of Brussels sprouts with lower levels of sinigrin, the compound responsible for bitterness. This breeding, combined with better cooking techniques like roasting or sautéing, transformed Brussels sprouts' reputation. Roasted Brussels sprouts, especially when caramelized with crispy edges, are entirely different from boiled ones. They're sweet, nutty, and addictive. The vegetable experienced a renaissance, appearing on restaurant menus as a trendy side dish. Brussels sprouts are grown on tall stalks, with the sprouts emerging from the stem in a spiral pattern. At harvest, the entire stalk might be cut, or individual sprouts are snapped off. They grow best in cool weather and actually taste sweeter after a frost, as the plant converts some starches to sugars in cold temperatures. Whether you love or hate Brussels sprouts might depend on which version you've tried. The new varieties, properly prepared, would be unrecognizable to people who grew up with bitter, overcooked sprouts. It's a reminder that vegetables are constantly evolving through breeding, and that cooking technique matters as much as ingredient quality. Salt used to be taxed heavily. Throughout history, governments taxed salt heavily because it was essential and the demand was inelastic. People needed it regardless of price. The gabelle, France's salt tax, was one of the most hated taxes in French history, contributing to unrest that led to the French Revolution. The tax varied by region, creating smuggling opportunities. Salt smugglers could face severe punishment, including death, yet people risked it because legal salt was prohibitively expensive. In British India, the salt tax was particularly oppressive. The British held a monopoly on salt production and sales, taxing it heavily. This affected everyone, especially the poor who couldn't afford the taxed salt. In 1930, Mahatma Gandhi led the Salt March, walking 240 miles to the sea to make salt in defiance of British law. This act of civil disobedience became a pivotal moment in India's independence movement, showing how a simple act regarding an essential resource could carry profound political significance. In China, salt monopolies existed for over 2,000 years, with salt taxes providing substantial government revenue. Other nations had similar systems. The universal human need for salt made it an easy target for taxation. Today, in most developed countries, salt isn't taxed specially, being too cheap and available to make taxation practical. But the history of salt taxation shows how governments have exploited essential resources and how such exploitation can spark resistance and even revolution. The next time you reach for salt without a second thought, remember it was once precious enough to fight wars over, and expensive enough that governments taxed it mercilessly. The freedom to salt your food freely is more modern than we might think. Mint has been loved for millennia. Mint, with its refreshing coolness and distinctive flavor, has been cultivated and cherished for at least 2,000 years. Ancient Egyptians included mint in their embalming mixtures. Greeks rubbed mint on tables before feasts, believing it welcomed guests and stimulated appetite. Romans used mint in sauces and as a strewing herb to freshen rooms. The cooling sensation isn't just perception. Menthol in mint activates cold, sensitive receptors in the mouth, making it feel cooler. There are dozens of mint species and hundreds of varieties, each with slight flavor variations. Peppermint is bold and intense, perfect for teas and candies. Spearmint is milder and sweeter, commonly used in cooking. Chocolate mint smells like its name suggests. Apple mint, pineapple mint, and orange mint have subtle fruit notes. The diversity shows how adaptable mint is and how many uses humans have found for it. Mint grows vigorously, almost invasively, spreading through underground runners. Gardeners often contain mint in pots because it will take over a garden bed given the chance. This aggressive growth made mint widely available historically, accessible to anyone with a patch of ground. Fresh mint appears in cuisines worldwide: Middle Eastern tabbouleh, Vietnamese pho, British mint sauce for lamb, American mint juleps, and Moroccan mint tea. Beyond culinary uses, mint has been employed medicinally for digestive issues, bad breath, and headaches. Peppermint oil is used in everything from toothpaste to muscle balms. The essential oils contain antimicrobial compounds. Whether chewing mint leaves for fresh breath, brewing mint tea for an upset stomach, or adding fresh mint to summer drinks, humans have been enjoying this herb's refreshing qualities for millennia. Its popularity endures because that clean, cool sensation never gets old. And so we rest. And so, dear listener, our journey through the world of food comes to a gentle close. From bread that sustained ancient civilizations to coffee that fuels our mornings. From spices that launched ships across oceans to humble vegetables growing in gardens. We have wandered together through fields of grain, groves of olives, and orchards heavy with fruit. We have tasted salt that shaped empires, honey that never spoils, and chocolate that was once more valuable than gold. Food connects us to every human who came before. When you bite into an apple, you share that experience with people from Kazakhstan 4,000 years ago. When you add vanilla to your baking, you're using a flavor the Aztecs treasured. When you drink tea, you participate in rituals that span continents and centuries. Every meal is a conversation with history, with geography, with the farmers and cooks who brought these ingredients to your table. The stories we've explored tonight remind us that food is never just fuel. It's culture, identity, economics, adventure, and art. It's the result of countless human choices over thousands of years. Every plant we eat was selected, bred, and adapted. Every dish carries techniques passed down through generations. Every flavor tells a story of trade routes, migrations, innovations, and traditions. As you lie here, imagine the fields of golden wheat swaying in warm breezes. Picture olive groves silver in Mediterranean sunlight. See pepper vines climbing in tropical forests, cacao pods growing from tree trunks, and vanilla orchids blooming for just one day. Taste the sweetness of honey, the sourness of lemons, the warmth of cinnamon, and the coolness of mint. Let these flavors drift through your mind, gentle and comforting. Food nourishes more than our bodies. It feeds our connections to each other, to the earth, to our ancestors and traditions. Every meal is a gift from the sun, from the soil, from the hands that planted, tended, harvested, and prepared. When we eat, we participate in cycles as old as agriculture itself, rhythms that have sustained humanity since we first pressed seeds into the earth. The next time you sit down to eat, perhaps you'll remember some of these stories. Maybe you'll taste your food a little differently, noticing the complexity in a simple strawberry, the history in a pinch of pepper, the miracle in a warm loaf of bread. Food is everyday magic, ordinary yet extraordinary, sustaining life while bringing joy, comfort, and wonder. As you drift toward sleep, let these thoughts settle softly. Breathe deeply and allow the gentle world of food to carry you into rest. Imagine the comforting warmth of soup on a cold day, the refreshing burst of watermelon on a hot afternoon, the smell of bread baking, the taste of honey on your tongue. Let these sensations blur and fade as sleep approaches, sweet and nourishing as the food that sustains us. If you happen to still be awake, you can go ahead and rest your eyes and drift away. But if your mind is growing quiet, if your body feels heavy and relaxed, let yourself surrender to sleep. Close your eyes, breathe slowly, and allow everything to fall away. Drift into stillness, into darkness, into the peaceful, nourishing embrace of sleep. Rest now. Let the stories of food settle into your dreams, and may you wake refreshed, ready to taste the world anew. Good night.